Hello. Hello. What's up? What's up, folks? Hello. Rob is listening to you thoughtfully. That's right. If you talk to, I know many of you talk to your screen when I do this program, and I just want you to know that I'm listening. It's a normal and healthy thing to do, and I encourage you to do it, and I can hear you. Hello, Praxid, Bass Junkie, Audio Only Bass Junkie, Dakadoon, Frank, Sam, Comrade Palindrome, Dakadoon, Chimera X Machine, Carrier Wave, Vlad the Victor, I'm saying everyone's name now, Johnny, Marty, Moss, Comrade Social Distancing, hello. Everyone gets a little shout out. Johnny, what happened on your stream? What happened on your stream? Is there some kind of mishap? Some kind of technical thing going on? He's naming names. Naming names. Relic. Hello. Get the new NVIDIA app that keeps you staring at us even when you aren't. It'll be nice and cozy, like a haunted painting whose eyes follow us. I did see that. That probably would be valuable to me because I have a hard time, like when I'm doing, when I'm hosting a show, like I should be looking here all the time, right? When I'm talking, I should be looking here, but usually I'm looking there though. Usually I'm looking here. Yeah, that's right. I look at myself. Okay? If you must know, if I have to admit it, yeah, I'm looking at myself usually when I'm streaming, all right? And there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm looking down here. I'm literally just like looking at myself. I just discovered a Peruvian soccer team called Club Sport Boys Association. I'd like to announce my new favorite team of all time. Gotta be clear about what's going on. It's right there in the name. Hello, B-Rat. What's up, everyone? I actually just did kind of a new exciting thing. I actually just did get a new camera. I got a little tired of not having good enough video quality. I'm never smooth enough. I have these lighting problems because of the shifting natural light in my room here. And I'm tired of it. It's been about 2 years with this camera, 2.5 years. I'm upgrading to 4K. I got a 4K camera. It's coming today. I guess I won't have time to. This will be the last stream on this camera, but I got tired of just the video footage, the quality not being good enough. So I'm upgrading. That's kind of exciting. Right? Kind of exciting stuff. If your face just says naturally a low pixel count, that could be it as well. That could be it also. Who knows? Who's to say? So I posted this in the Discord server, but this is kind of cool. Like I said, I'm starting to try and take these stream clips and put them on other platforms. So I took a clip from yesterday's stream and I turned it into a TikTok today. Where's my window capture? It's right here. Came out pretty well. Voting, going to city council meetings, signing petitions. It might be able to make a few small little tiny tweaks around the edges, right? And that's not nothing. Can you, using these methods, make actually drastic systemic change to the police, to the way that we consume fossil fuels, to our immigration policy? There's you, chat. And if the answer to that question is no, and I think we all know what the answer is, right? If the answer to that question is no, you can't use these methods to make these kinds of changes, well then, do we actually live in a democracy? Do we have any right to be criticizing or accusing other countries of being authoritarian? What good is free speech? What good is the right to freedom of assembly and the freedom to participate in the democratic process? What good are any of these rights if it doesn't actually lead to any of the big systemic changes that we know are necessary? What good is it? Asking the important questions. TikTok is really hard. The algorithm has never rewarded me on TikTok, but I do encourage people to follow me there. If you want to. Give me a follow on there. Help boost my... Oh, fuck. I can't... Why? Oh. Boost my algorithm. Boost my algorithm by subscribing on TikTok. I did also put that on YouTube as well. The YouTube algorithm being a little bit more kind to me. Actually putting this in front of some people. So we're making progress, folks. We're getting the show out there to a whole new audience. Yeah, the Blade Runner music is a nice little addition, isn't it? It's nice. You got to do some dances as well. But we have 50 flavors of chocolate cereal. That's freedom. Yeah, we have a bunch of different kinds of variations of corn and sugar in different sort of variations. Well, and I had someone point out in the YouTube comments like, well, yeah, all the things that you oh, fuck, my music was playing that whole time. I had someone pointing out in the comments, well, all the changes that you say are necessary are not like universally agreed on. And it's like, yeah, well, no shit, because people's like values and their perceptions of politics and our culture are informed by our media, and our media is owned by billionaires and private interests. No wonder these views are not haven't hit this critical mass. That's kind of by design. And the point is, when you talk about those questions too, like even if it was a critical mass, even if you did work and work and work for, yeah, Dimitri, you snuck in the Stalin quote on there. Even if you work and work and work to organize and do these things the right way and vote and make incremental change and elect congresspeople and city council members and state senators and congresspeople and senators and whatever, and you just go work and organize and do that. If you do get to a point where you can democratically do this, is it still possible? Because that's a process that we're talking about. It's going to take years. That's a multi-year long process just to maybe get to that point. Maybe just to like change through your liberal democracy, change Congress, change the Senate, change the Canadian government using these official democratic methods. And can you still say like, okay, well, we're reappropriating wealth from billionaires now. We're getting off of fossil fuels. We're nationalizing all these corporations. Can you do that? Really? Even if you take that multi-year-long process of constant organizing and advocating and voting and all that stuff within the system, even if that works, even if you get to that point, can you actually vote democratically, decide to do those things? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure you can. I'm not so sure that you can, folks. Sometimes I just I can't help but get the feeling that this whole like Western style liberal democracy that we love so much, that we love to lecture everyone else around the world about, that we love to force other countries to adapt. Sometimes I don't quite think it's quite as free and democratic and non-authoritarian as what its biggest promoters and fetishists like to claim. Remember, you have free speech. You can go on Twitch and say what you want. You can go in the street and carry a bunch of signs. Okay, good. But what does that mean when that has no impact over anything? What does that mean? When all our protests and our speech and our our right to free assembly, when it amounts to nothing at all, what does that do? Yeah, you kind of have that. Like, not even really. I don't know how you can seriously suggest reforming any of these institutions is possible. No one has faith in them anymore. Even if you put your people in those institutions, the institutions change them, not the other way around. Yeah, I mean, just like look at how the squad or whatever has been voting in lockstep to keep pumping weapons into Ukraine, right? Even like Ilhan Omar, who, especially when she was first elected, I thought like, oh wow, she's a really like a different voice for foreign policy. Kind of has this like these kind of anti-imperialist ideals, and then what? Even her, you know, she's out there accusing China of being just as bad as Nazi Germany, and voting to pump arms into these Ukrainian militias. So it's like, what's the, you know? Okay, so elect 20 more of those types of ideologically oriented people. What then? Like, what does it matter? What's it going to do? AOC's like first vote was to continue to fund ICE, and it's been downhill basically ever since. She felt really conflicted about it, though. She felt very conflicted. She felt very, very conflicted about this. I can't take leftists talking about her being some sort of lesser evil. Like, I don't know, I can come around on the basic idea that like having folks like that in Congress is better than having these like corporate sellout Democrats. Like, they've got slightly better values than a lot of the people in like the center or the right wing of the party, but like, what does that actually mean though when they don't act on those values in any really meaningful way? You know, what does it even, maybe on like a media level, you're having someone making certain arguments that they weren't making before, but like, what is that doing? I liked when Rashida said, I'll boo. Yeah, when she booed, that was great. People were so mad that she booed Hillary. I don't know. So I think it's an interesting and provocative question. This idea of whether we live in a democracy. Maybe the folks on YouTube or TikTok will respond. Maybe the algorithm will finally reward me. Feeling bad about voting for bad things does not improve material conditions, unfortunately. Yeah. No, it doesn't. It could generously be called a managed democracy. And we're getting heavy right off the bat. Right off the bat, we're doing some serious discourse here. The idea that we live in a democracy is the true sense of the word is literally the biggest sham. That's the kind of what I've been trying to push back on, right? It's kind of what I've been trying to push back on. And the idea that any other country that doesn't have our exact political system is authoritarian. It's an autocracy. That's the biggest sham. That's the biggest possible sham about our culture and our politics and our society.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hey, Rough Hands. Thank you very much, Rough Hands, for the Prime sub. Look at that, a brand new community member. That's always very exciting. Thank you, Rough Hands. Welcome. It is a police state, yeah. I mean, I saw that amazing there was that Matt Walsh tweet, and I know Matt Walsh just says things that are outrageous and provocative, and we don't need to like do a big discourse about it. But there was a tweet showing the airport in Singapore and just being like, this is what countries around the world have, like the beautiful airport, just showing the different infrastructure. And Matt Walsh made this case that's like, the reason they're able to have nice things is because their police officers like beat and murder drug dealers and drug users or something along those lines. And we'd be able to have nice things too if we had that attitude. when like American cops literally are just murdering people, just shooting people in the street every single day with zero accountability. Like American police are already very violent towards people that haven't even committed crimes, let alone to people that have committed crimes. What does that have to do with fucking infrastructure and not having nice infrastructure or airports? It's the richest country in the world. American cops are indeed already quite violent and it's not a nice place. It doesn't treat people that caught up in the criminal justice system, doesn't treat them nicely. You don't even need to deal drugs. Exactly. You can just look at them the wrong way. Or you can just do nothing at all. Or you can just sit in your car. Did you see the 4-star U.S. general foaming at the mouth for U.S. resources? I think I actually did see this. Dimitri, this like, you see this, the thing that I'm always amazed at with this kind of thing is just that they say this kind of stuff openly and then they wonder why countries in Latin America and elsewhere don't want to make deals with the United States and are looking towards China and other means of development and looking to make trade deals with them and give them access to their natural resources. It's so funny how they just can't square this. They can't understand why these countries are making this decision.
If I talk to my number 2 adversary in the region, Russia, I mean, I've got, of course, the countries, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Russia relationships. But what I really look at, and 6 other countries, by the way, so a total of 9 that have Russian equipment in them, and we're working to replace that Russian equipment with United States equipment if those countries want to donate it to Ukraine or the cause that's happening, and be able to replace that with U.S. equipment. If I talk to my number 2...
it's just such a mystery to them, isn't there? It's such a mystery to them. Why are these Latin American countries making deals with Russia? Why are they making deals with China? Why isn't Africa backing us in our quest to isolate Russia? And why isn't Africa backing us in this proxy war? Why is Africa joining the Belt and Road Initiative? Why are they rejecting U.S. influence and hegemony? It's just a mystery. It's just a total mystery. They just can't wrap their minds around it.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I will know better next time after I got beat up by cops for eating a sandwich in my car. TRRS sad Rob.
Thank you, Useless, for the 13 months of Tier 1. Thank you. Well, just it. When the cops beat the shit out of you for eating a sandwich in your car, that means that you're going to have a nicer airport and you're contributing to it. So... it's just such a mystery. It's such a mystery why these countries, why would anyone in Latin America or Africa not want to make a deal with the United States of America? We just don't know.
Rich resources and rare earth elements. You've got the lithium triangle, which is needed for technology today. 60% of the world's lithium is in the lithium triangle: Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. You just have the largest oil reserves, light sweet crude, discovered off of Guyana over a year ago. You have Venezuela's resources as well with oil, copper, gold. China gets 36% of its food source from this region. We have the Amazon, lungs of the world. We have 31% of the world's fresh water in this region too. I mean, it's just off the charts. But then when you talk about trade is unbelievable. The trade in the region, I talked about all the ties that we have with this hemisphere. But the PRC and a lot of our countries in this region is the #1 trade partner, with the United States #2 in most cases. Not in most cases, I would say in some cases. However, to see the increase in investment in trade from 2002 from China, 18 billion up to 450 billion now, and on its way, what is predicted to be about 750 billion.
Getting your ass handed to you,
in
lady.
the near future. And so I think we have a lot at stake.
What are these sovereign countries doing? Don't they know that they're not allowed to make these decisions?
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
You don't go to poor countries to make money. TRRS Parenti.
Thank you, Dimitri. That's right. We have these resources there in these sovereign countries. And don't these places know that they're not allowed to make these choices? They're not allowed to work with Russia on this? Has anyone told them? Didn't they get the memo? You're not allowed to increase trade with China. We don't like it. We said no. We're saying no, and you're not listening. These places are getting very they're getting very comfortable making these kinds of decisions regarding the natural resources in the places where they live. And it's very scary, very threatening to the United States. That's right, Sinshao. Little girls can see her. You know, I can be an imperialist dog one day as well. Didn't they pay attention to all the Western lectures? We've been lecturing them and wagging our finger at them, and they're not listening. They're not listening. You know, this is the really kind of satisfying thing about what we're seeing. This global shift that we've been covering on the show. You know, as much as hopeless or as doomer or whatever that I can sound like when I talk about, you know, our culture and whether things are going to get better here, what our prospects are, it does just fill me with hope and inspiration to see this shift happening. And every day there's another kind of chip that's chipped away from the sort of just this like endless Western hegemony that that's been in place throughout our entire lives. And every single day it's chipped away at a little bit more. And to see the reaction from people like this who are just perplexed, they don't understand it. They're clearly, you know, it's filling them with anxiety and trepidation. That's enjoyable. No matter how doomer it can be. It is very enjoyable to see this shift happening, to see powerful people in the United States realize that it's too late for them to do anything. You know, that's enjoyable. We can feel good about that. Why are they talking to other countries like some kind of jilted psychotic stalker? Seriously, I was like, I wish I could find the clip because I know there was a clip. I don't know if it was this woman or another. I don't think it was. I think it was someone like in the State Department testifying and was saying all these things, just like they're totally perplexed why these countries are making these decisions, why they're not taking the America's version of development, right? We're offering you all these World Bank funds and these loans. Why aren't you taking our deals that we're offering? Why are you going with China? Why aren't you going with the US style development? It's just a total mystery. It is a total mystery to these people why this is going on. And that's amazing, you know. Those are people that are in an echo chamber, in a bubble, right? They don't fucking get it. It's like, yes, people in Africa, people in Latin America know a little bit about the history of their countries and societies and the role that the United States has played there. No, they're not. Yes, they are tired with making these fucking deals with the United States. They know what that means. When you cut these deals with the United States for development. Why are all these African countries that have been on that path of US-style development for now generations haven't fucking developed? It's not that there's something wrong with them. It's not that there's something wrong with the people. It's that there's something wrong with the fucking deal they're making. The country, what the massive economic powerhouse and military powers is promising them and not delivering. I think this is it, Relic. Thanks. Quick on the draw, Relic, what we call them.
And roadway initiative projects have been implemented in really a predatory fashion.
Oh, it's predatory.
Congress attempted to counteract China's Belt and Roadway initiatives
it's
in 2008.
It's predatory to go into a country and just be like, hey, we can have nice, better trade deals. We'll build you a bunch of roads and ports and bridges and trains and schools and power plants or whatever it is you might need, as long if we can get some access to some of these natural resources and we can make trade deals with you in the future. And they say, okay. And they shake on it and make a deal. And the United States says, that's so predatory. You know, we'd never be predatory making these same deals, you know. We would never be predatory making these offers to these countries. We're doing it because we love freedom.
Congress attempted to counteract China's Belt and Roadway initiatives in 2018, the BUILD Act. As far as I can tell, and I may be incorrect, but there seems to be little interest by the underdeveloped nations to utilize the U.S. BUILD Act over China.
It's so strange.
Why do you think these nations have been so hesitant to utilize the U.S. and help fund their initiatives?
Congresswoman, thank you so much for the question. And I completely concur with General Richardson's characterization of what China is doing in the region through its gray zone tactics and leveraging BRI. We have seen those predatory practices play out in other regions of the
Cool. Thank you, Elon. Thank you, Elon. The website works great. The website's working just great. Thank you.
Belt and Road.
Doing a great job.
We have seen those predatory practices play out in other regions of the
Good. Good job. When will Africa learn these sinister, inscrutable Orientals, unlike the Western world, can't be trusted? They might as well just come right out and say that. I guess the content is just looking at this now.
Roadway.
those predatory practices play out.
It just doesn't work. It just straight up does not work. We just can't watch the video. Sorry. Yeah, same with us, Base Junkie. Great to see they truly believe in their own propaganda. I think that's a big part of it. I think people that get to these positions, this was a big part of that. One of my main takeaways from Jakarta Method as well. When you're talking about the absolute evils that were perpetrated, how could you do that? How could someone be responsible for such atrocity, such evil? Like, do they know that they're just exploiting people for the benefit of the American economic interests and the interests of these multinational corporations? No, they think they're doing some profound good. They think they really want to help develop these places. And they really do believe this shit about the predatory, making these predatory deals. You know? You don't get to this position in the U.S. government by just like talking through two sides of your mouth and just being a cynical and believing it's about power and like they really do believe, I think, the things that they say about this. There is the Apple Crunch, so it's not nothing. Rating on the Apple, it's solid. You know, I got kind of into those Cosmic Crisps. I'm kind of wishing I had some more of those now. It's a solid 7 on this though. I would really like to watch this fucking clip.
Incorrect, but there seems to be to utilize the U.S. and why do you think these nations have been so hesitant to utilize the U.S. and help fund their initiatives?
Congresswoman, thank you so much for the question, and I completely concur with General Richardson's characterization of what China is doing in the region through its gray zone tactics and leveraging BRI. We have seen those predatory practices play out in other regions of the world.
Jesus Christ. Okay. It's simply impossible to know why they're so dang hesitant. We just don't know. Yeah, we've seen these predatory practices play out in other regions of the world by China very sinisterly building schools and power plants. Very scary stuff. F5 it. I did. It fucking won't work. Video on Twitter is just like broken. Like even if you go to my, like the TRRS Twitter account, shit barely works.
Of Africa.
Someone in fucking Canada. Let's take a look at what mining interests in Canada. And we're in the same shirt. And what they're up to in Africa. Should we do that, Christia? Like we're fucking lecturing Africans about democracy. Let's see, shit doesn't work. The video is just broken. Video on Twitter is just broken. Okay, thank you, Mikey.
China and the AOR. As General Richardson mentioned earlier in her testimony, the Belt and Roadway Initiative projects have been implemented in really a predatory fashion. Congress attempted to counteract China's Belt and Roadway initiatives in 2018, the BUILD Act. As far as I can tell, and I may be incorrect, but there seems to be little interest by the underdeveloped nations to utilize the U.S. BUILD Act over China. Why do you think these nations have been so hesitant to utilize the U.S. and help fund their initiatives?
Mystery.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for the question, and I completely concur with General Richardson's characterization of what China is doing in the region through its gray zone tactics and leveraging
gray zone
BRI.
tactics. What does
we have
that even
seen
mean?
those predatory practices play out in other regions of the world, and it's disturbing that it is happening in
the hemisphere.
The hemisphere as well,
that's their
and with our close
territory.
partners.
That belongs to them.
In
It's
response to your
disturbing.
question, I would have to defer to the Department of State and USAID colleagues in terms
Of course, we defer to
how
the
the
USAID.
conversations are proceeding.
We've got to refer to our CIA-sponsored USAID colleagues to really get to the bottom of this. Why would they not want to work with us, the honest, upstanding white Americans, instead of the devious Chinese? That's basically there's no, like, saying these devious gray zone tactics are exploitative. Like, there's no way of backing that up. They don't back that up with any actual information. It's just accepted as gospel.
Proceeding with partners in the region as they engage them on the BUILD Act, but certainly to underscore the need for a holistic approach to the region to get after the gray zone challenge.
We're offering help,
Yes.
and they're not taking it.
Yes.
But yet, so when I talk is we need to provide assistance, we need to provide assistance, we need to provide assistance, then we provide assistance and they don't want it. So is that really the issue, or is there something I'm missing?
It's an excellent question, Congresswoman, and again, I would have to defer to the State Department, who is on the front lines of engaging with partners on that particular issue. But certainly from a Department of Defense perspective, we continue our security cooperation, commitments, and relationships
Must be something wrong with everyone
as a great
else.
way to continue to build the relationships in the region.
But we have to get them off of China and our adversaries.
Really spilling it out, isn't it? You know, they're not shy about it.
And we really have to spend some time on why, because it really isn't that
Sorry,
we're
the
not
gentlelady's
providing
time has
information.
expired. Ms.
Why?
Escobar is recommended.
Fucking, it's like, how do I know the answer to this question? This lady has all the resources in the world. You're a fucking U.S. congressman. You really don't know why? Really? Like, you know what I mean? Why do I know? Why do I know and this lady doesn't? That's very strange to me. I'm just some guy. Okay? I'm just some random guy. But you don't know. Have they tried imprisoning them? That's right. In fact, they have. Yes. They disappeared and imprisoned a whole generation of trade unionists and socialists and radicals and activists and teachers. They have, in fact, tried that for many decades in Latin America. Perhaps it's that has led to this current situation where these countries in Latin America that have been the victims of this kind of violence are saying, like, no thank you to the United States. Maybe these two things are connected. I don't know. I just don't know. Why won't they let us make things worse for them? He's just some guy, you know? That's right, Lodane. Why are they giving our stuff away? Like it's in our hemisphere. And they're giving our resources away to China, and we just can't figure out why. We can't get to the bottom of why. It's because they're engaging in this devious, exploitative gray zone tactics. These gray zone tactics. Is everyone excited for the convoy anniversary? Who's going to stay up and count down to midnight with me on Friday? I had actually forgotten that's what was going on. The convoy. Is there any convoy stuff happening? Being planned, Stu? And hello, Stu. What's going on? It's our hemisphere. That's right. It's as Vijay Prashad pointed out on this very program. It's the global Monroe Doctrine. Right? It is the global Monroe Doctrine. Man, that fucking convoy. Remember last year during the convoy protests and I had all these people telling me I supported Big Pharma and stuff? Because I wasn't going to throw my support behind this like fascist movement of these fucking brainwashed, delusional, reactionary, petit bourgeois conspiracy theorists. And I was getting lectured by the Pat Socks or MAGA communists or whatever it was. And now they're all LaRoucheites. Crazy how that happens. Gray zone taxes. Like in basketball when your man switches from a man-to-man defense. I don't know. I genuinely am not sure what she means by that. Jorks and Honkler, of course, yeah. Remember those alleged communists trying to say that the convoy was in fact good? No, I do remember. I had them coming in here and yelling at me when I was doing my coverage of it. And like we said again, it's like, oh, you're supporting Trudeau. You don't support them like going against the government. Just because people go up against the government who I don't like, doesn't mean I automatically agree with them. As I said yesterday, I don't even care. It's not even the tactics. It's the people and what they're demanding. You know, if people want to organize a convoy and occupy Ottawa for Indigenous rights or the climate or for an anti-war movement or to redistribute income from the billionaires to everyone else, I'll happily support these convoy tactics. Maybe not like the honking in front of people's homes and yelling, screaming in the faces of service workers. Not that. If you want to go occupy Ottawa for a good reason, I will happily support it. Happily. You know, it's not the fucking tactics. It's the people and like the things that they're demanding. They think Trudeau is super Hitler because of masks. Yeah. They're working class, okay? They can just take weeks off work and afford $200 dinners at the JCCF award ceremony honoring the convoy organizers. That's right. Driving around their like fucking $100,000 Ford F-150s. What if political content is actually the key factor and not the tactics? It's a pretty crazy idea. Pretty wild. The convoy is still active out here on the left coast. Still do a weekly yelling into the void about vaccines at a local park and mini convoy down the highway. Oh, good. That's good. Maybe not the defecating on public roadways tactic. Not less that. Less that. Yeah. The true North Center think tank weirdos think that they were very working class. One was wearing boots. Well, and you also had the comments from like the Ottawa Police Department being like, this is not like one of those normal protests of these like lefties. These are like real, like hardworking, salt of the earth, silent majority types. And that's why we have to treat them very carefully. Because these are not like ordinary protesters. These are like actually normal, good people. Yeah, vaccines. I hate getting healthcare in emergencies. And of course, as it always turns out, many of these folks took money from the government during the pandemic. There's little small business loans or whatever. But they're still very upset about all this shit. Canadian pickups with Confederate flags. It's just a bad scene. It was a bad scene overall. And, you know, it was really great to get lectured by like fucking Haas and Jackson Hinkle. And then they tried to pretend that the DC convoy was going to be a thing, and it just completely failed. I want to see those guys come again, as I mentioned last year. I would love to see those guys come up here and wave a Soviet Union flag, wave the hammer and sickle, and sign up some of these hardworking, salt of the earth types. Get them into our program. Like, that's what I didn't get. Like, why are you complaining about what Rob Rousseau is saying about this? Why don't you come up here and start talking to these folks? What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? The reason Rob really hates geese is because they're white and they honk when they're upset. That's right. I'm so against honkies. Yuck. My vape is getting all gunked up. All kinds of gunk. It gets gunk in there and then it goes in my pocket and then pocket lint mixes with the gunk. That's no good. I think Haas has been replaced by Eddie Lager on Midwest Marks. That's really unfortunate. That is really, really unfortunate. I wanted Eddie to be better. I've said I've always appreciated the work that he does in sharing a correct view of like foreign policy and imperialism. and getting that in front of large numbers of people. You know, it's sad to see. It's sad to know that you would go down that path. Yeah, I remember that ML Thoughtism. I remember
You
well.
can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Starting work late for the next while so poppin' in for a bit. Feels like ages. Missed you guys.
Human person, thanks so much. And look at that, the 11 months of tier 1 from human person. Thank you, human person, whose life was completely disrupted during those convoy protests as well. Still kills me. Yeah, well, it's sad to see these like splits happen. You know? People that you like and respect going off in these reactionary directions. You hate to see it. But, folks, as you know, it just says chit this. You know, these people that you like and trust going off into these reactionary directions. But, folks, as you know, as you hear day in and day out on this program, you can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this. And I will continue having the correct analysis and the correct viewpoints. And I will not go down this reactionary path. This is my promise to you. I will not betray you. I will not. And gunk-free vapes for all. That's right. Was listening to Press Progress sources today. They mentioned that there's allegedly another convoy planned in mid-February in Winnipeg. What? Serious question though. What are they protesting? Like, I actually want to know. What are they even mad about? The convoy people won. Why are they still complaining? They got everything that they wanted. Okay? You want to go to the restaurant without a mask? Fucking go for it. Don't want to get a vaccine? Okay, don't get one. Don't get a booster. You want the hospitals just to be filled up 6 months out of a year with COVID and other respiratory illnesses? You got it. There you go. You got it. What exactly is the problem? What are you so mad about now? I genuinely don't get it. Now they're complaining they have to even be around people because of the vaccine shedding. I think it was Comrade Social Distancing that just shared this too. We didn't get everything we want. Harry Potter. You know, Harry Potter is not the only person in fiction that wears glasses, you know? And they don't even look like this, the glasses that Harry Potter wears. I don't understand where that's coming from. But what did you not get? Why don't you fucking enlighten me? Equalizing, distort. Why don't you fucking enlighten me? What did you not get? What are you mad about? What is going on? Just inflation? Is that it? Is that the problem?
And why? Because it really isn't.
What is it that you're mad about? Didn't own the libs hard enough yet. I mean, I feel like you did own the libs because you got them to change all of their own policies that they claim to support about public health. That seems like a pretty big lib owning to me. You got them to back out on all of their fucking
to talk you through all this.
Rob Russo. Rob Russo. Rob Russo. You have 2 yil.
Thank you, Ghost. Thank you, Ghost, for the 24 months, tier 1. And congratulations to you, Ghost, on the super elite exclusive golden TRRS sub badge. But they got rid of all their public health policies. Like, they were owned. I genuinely don't get it. Like, you should just be celebrating now. I think it's just a thing where it worked once and they have no other ideas. That's right. They weren't expecting to. Good point. I guess the only thing left is an apology tour from Branch Covidians. Well, don't fret. I came here. Now let's hear you say sorry. But for what, though? For what, though? I'm genuinely confused about what you think you need an apology for. Do you not think COVID existed? Like, our hospitals are still filled with people, right? Many thousands of people in Canada and over 1 million people in the United States have died from this, right? Do you just not believe that that's true? Do you just believe that that's fake? That's fake news or whatever? Is it really upsetting to you that you had to sometimes wear a mask on your face when you went inside around other people? Isn't it just basically not a bad idea in general, just to not be spraying your gross germs all over the place? You do believe germs exist, do you? You do believe that germs exist. Maybe it's just a good idea, even if you don't think COVID is real, to when you go in a grocery store or you go around a bunch of people, wear something on your face so you're not spitting and hawking gross germs and bacteria all over them. Is that so bad to do? Is that so terrible? Our whole healthcare system is collapsing, like Eric is pointing out. It's being privatized. Our whole public healthcare system, that's going away now because of the pandemic that happened. You're going to be paying for healthcare now in the future where you didn't have to before.
This is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Ambiguibot, thank you for the raid. Hello. Hello, Raiders. Hello, Raiders. Bring it on in here. We're just having a civil discussion with someone in the chat about how Justin Trudeau is literally Hitler because people had to wear masks in the grocery store for a few months. And I was apparently enforcing this. He's double Hitler. Okay. Well, that was interesting. It was really a low effort, low energy sort of troll. They're not sending their best. The convoy supporters are not sending their best. I actually came to Quinn's apartment to make him mask up. I made you mask up. It was one of those gas mask bongs, though. I was here, you need to put this on for your health. That's what that was. At least you only had one. We had 5 come into our stream the other night because we talked shit about LaRouche. Oh boy. It's strange. I get a decent amount of viewers, not a huge amount or anything. But not a lot of trolls. I guess part of the problem, Johnny, you're probably in the politics tab, aren't you? I'm in the Just Chatting tab with all kinds of interesting, fun folks and fine individuals. When you go into that politics tab, that's where you run into trouble. We changed to Just Chatting. Strange. And I'm on during the day. I guess that's it. They're scared of Lodane. That's true. You know what song I have stuck in my head is the George Clooney version of, well, it's George Clooney, it doesn't sing, but that from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Man of Constant Sorrow. That's been in my head all day. I think I saw it as a tweet in response to one of those prompts about like what's the best like song from a movie that's not just like good for the movie but is actually good. That was one of them. I don't even want to read that, Lodane, then that's going to get stuck in my head. Excuse me, this is clearly political speech. Shouldn't it be in the politics section instead of just chatting? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We can just chat about politics as well. Go into the gaming section. Well, you know, as a pro gamer, sometimes I do that. And my new camera is almost here. Or as I call them, politricks. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. I'm wondering if my camera gets here, if I should stop the stream and plug it in and go live with the new camera. I'm kind of excited about it, so I guess I should probably just wait till tomorrow. The place that he was born and raised. We thought you was a toad. You're probably going to have to load some drivers or software, so you're better off waiting till tomorrow. Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be 4K. This is the last you'll see of me, even though it doesn't look so bad today because the lighting is good.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Come tomorrow, I'm going to be 4K Rob, though. There's going to be 4,000 pixels of me on the screen. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for that many pixels? Thank you, Dimitri, for gifting a sub. And I don't know, why on earth would you want 4K? Well, just because Lodane, I'm tired of like, I've been having some trouble with the lighting. I don't know if you saw me that yesterday. And I've just been getting consistently annoyed at the quality of the video. I can't get it to look as good as I feel like other streamers. And I'm kind of annoyed about it, and I'm tired of it, so I just wanted to upgrade the camera to try and see if I can fix the video quality issues. It doesn't look bad right now because of the lighting, but then the lighting shifts, and it's like, then it starts being bad, and I'm just annoyed. I'm tired of it. Politricks and Stalin Grandpa got me lolling. I love that Stalin Grandpa. They recorded a version with Clooney actually singing, and it's even better. That's interesting. So I'm going to look for like a breakthrough news or some kind of like
to
a...
talk you through all this.
I'm a Dapper Dan man, not a Rick Astley man.
Thank you, Tiniest Boop. Tiniest Boop for the 18 months tier 1. Thank you very much, Tiniest Boop. I appreciate it. How would a George Clooney's version sound better? I'm sure it wouldn't. I was just curious to hear what it sounded like. Jesus. Unbelievable. You know, I try to log in here to twitch.tv every day to try and like entertain people, to try and create a little community that people like spending time in. Oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I guess that gives people license to mock, to
We
fixate,
simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
to fixate on every little mistake that I make, to rickroll. That's what I get for wanting to try to create a nice little space here on twitch.tv where we all feel welcome, where we all have a little community. That's what I get for the crime of trying to create interesting and informative content for people. And this is how I get treated. This is how people say thank you. Wow. Shut up, Marty. I'm not mad. But Chad, it's disappointing, okay? I am disappointed. I thought I knew you better than that. I thought you knew better. I thought
You
that
can count on me. You're going to have
perhaps
good old Rob to talk you through all this.
people might show a little bit of appreciation for for creating the space. Thank you, Comrade Social Distancing, for the 2 gifted subs. Thank you. He's actually laughing at you, thinking he'd be foolish enough to not do that on purpose for engagement in a free TikTok video. Absolutely not. I take this shit really seriously, and I know you recognize that, Marty. I thought you would know better by now. Well, sorry. My big mistake is that I trust too much. That's my mistake. I should know better. Yeah, my big error that I'm making is thinking that people in this chat take this shit seriously like I do. That's my big crime. That's my big mistake. Thinking that people in this community actually care. That might have a little bit of maturity. But I guess not.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
We won't give up on you, Rob. We're sorry we let you down. We'll stick around so as to not hurt you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Iron Forward, for the 500 friend coin. I appreciate your kind message. Thank you. And thank you also to Lennon Smesh for the gifted sub. If you donate 10 subs, you can hear the cool VJ alert plus 1 free Rickroll at a time of Rob's choosing. Still no. Not even the 10 sub gifters. No way. Like I was negged into that one. I'll take it. I will take it. You know what? Just to go along with sort of what we were talking about at the beginning of the stream, there is a video here on Breakthrough News called Will 2023 Be the Year of Backfiring Sanctions for the Overstretched U.S. Empire? So perhaps that's something we can take a look at. That could be good. Right? That kind of goes along with what we were talking about before. One thing though, if people want to show me a respect, even though there is a hype train, there's 3 minutes left in this level 2 hype train. But I'm telling you, no one subscribed to the channel. I'm trying to be serious today. I don't want to have to deal with the constant interruptions of the subs and the interruptions and the alerts. So just hype train or no, please, while I'm trying to talk about these serious subjects, this serious subject matter, please refrain from any further interruptions, okay? Because that's also very frustrating to me. So we do have this like informative video that we can take a look at from Breakthrough. I think that should probably be beneficial. I can maybe take a little break from all the talking. History, Rick's protracted role war. Clearly all the talking and all the work that I've been doing and creating this this content doesn't mean all that much to this community. So why should I even bother? Why should I even bother? I'll just put on a video.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Sean, thanks. I thank you for the tier 1 sub, Sean. I appreciate it. I did clearly indicate though that I would like to have no further disruptions. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you. But let's try and cut back on those moving forward. And maybe we'll go in the politics tab. How about that? That could be kind of fun. What do we think about that idea? Collapsing empire. I'm doing the accent, but in like text form now. Okay, I'm putting this on, and I'm getting something to drink because I'm very thirsty.
Military intervention is still something that is deployed, but look at where it is deployed. I think that gets you to the heart of your point, right? It's deployed on states that are weakened, that do not have a military deterrent capacity, right? But when you look at a state like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, you look at a state like Venezuela or Iran, where you simply do not have the means to establish.
I got the politics tab.
I think your attempts to restructure, let's say, those states in ways in which their sovereignty is diminished through military means, and so that is, I think, why sanctions become the preferred instrument of imperialism. And in fact, in many ways,
we're doing it.
It's a much more effective instrument.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Kalik, and this is Dispatches. It's a new year, and thus a good time to reassess where the world is at.
Hey, Marcus, how's it going?
And where it's headed. 2022 was defined by
Sorry, I missed Fortnite time.
An ever-expanding NATO, a U.S. desperate to maintain its hegemony amidst the rise of China, and the continued overuse of sanctions. It seems U.S. empire is so overstretched that sanctions have become the primary.
Maybe we should just not even do this stream anyways and just cancel this whole video idea and just play Fortnite instead. Hey, Marcus, these people are rickrolling me. I'm getting fucking rickrolled. In the year of our Lord, 2023, my own chat, disrespecting me, humiliating me, and rickrolling me. And they think that they deserve more content. More informative, educating, humorous content. They're just like, dance, monkey. While we mock you. While we try to embarrass you. What level am I? Actually, I'm not sure. I have to check. I'm like I think I'm in the 50s. Anyway, I guess we'll continue with this video for now, depending on how things go.
It seems US empire is so overstretched that sanctions have become the primary form of warfare. But could they backfire? What can we expect to see in 2023? To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Bikram Gill, who teaches at the Department of Political Science at Virginia Tech. But before we jump into it, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get a notification whenever we post new content. And if you appreciate this show, you can help it grow by becoming a patron at patreon.com/breakthrough news or by donating below on YouTube. Bikram, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
It's great to have you as one of my first guests of 2023. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year's.
And it's good to raise the prospect of the beginning of a year because, of course, we kind of want to talk about some themes that I think we're going to see quite a bit throughout this year, geopolitically.
Check. Thank you, Librarian, for the gifted sub to Marcus. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I wasn't muted there. Thank you, Librarian.
And I know it might seem sort of repetitious, but I think it's always good when we're going to have a conversation, a broader conversation about imperialism, to maybe just give like a brief definition. I know we did this last time I had you on the show. But, you know, when most people think of imperialism, they do think of wars and invasions to secure resources for the global north, right? Or like if people who are more into theory will think of Lenin's definition of it as the state.
No, this is not a cult or a pyramid scheme, Purdy Tang. But thank you for asking. I always appreciate the opportunity to clarify this. It's not a cult or a pyramid scheme. As it says in the title of the stream, it's Twitch's only exclusive trickle-down clout friendship access tiered reward system. Two-dimensional triangular shaped. Okay? Big difference.
Age of capitalism, which is all very true and accurate. But that said, imperialism is in fact a very essential part of capitalism. So just very, very quickly, because we're going to go into
the highest stage of it.
Sanctions. We're going to go into talking about NATO.
It's a non-problematic polygon.
Russia and China and the new Cold War. So before we get into all that, can you just kind of give a brief overview of what you mean when you say imperialism?
Yes. So imperialism, I think there's definitely elements we can take from Lenin. We can take from, I think, some of what you mentioned there in terms of how imperialism functions as a means of securing resources. This is all a part of, I think, imperialism as I understand it. And
he does
as I work with the concept. But I definitely would think about, I think in the first instance, I would agree with you that it's important that we understand imperialism in our current context in the modern era as a feature of capitalism. And
I think it's when one country invades another country,
that
right?
makes capitalism a world system, right? So again, capitalism,
I think that's what it means.
Conventionally understood as an economic system that operates according to a certain property structure as a means of production where a system of private property, a capitalist property, exploits a dispossessed class of labor to generate profits, reinvest those profits with the objective of enhancing capital accumulation. Right? So that's kind of how we understand
capital. Sorry, yeah. Imperialism, it's not just when a country invades another country, it's also when a country makes a trade deal with another country. When they say like, hey, we can build you a port and we just want access to these rare earth minerals that you have. Imperialism, folks. You got to watch out for this. That's how they get you.
capitalism as a system, but from its inception, capitalism has operated on a world scale, right? And because in order to stabilize that capital-labor relationship, right, because you're exploiting workers, but you also need workers to function as consumers, right? So how do you simultaneously repress wages and have workers and a broader, potentially middle class participating in an economy? So you stabilize that relationship through access to cheap goods from the colonies or from the imperially subjugated territories, right? So imperialism from its inception has been very important to helping or to enabling, let's say, core capitalist countries to access cheap resources, which they can repress the cost of production in the core, repress the cost of labor, but still enable the reproduction of labor at the same time, right? So I think that's one important element to keep in mind, that from its inception, that capitalism has been the world system. Now, how does it secure these resources from the periphery? This is where I would say, in my understanding of imperialism, is a key component of it. It's through a denial of sovereignty, right, to colonized and imperially subjugated peoples, right? Now, this denial of sovereignty is what enables then a transfer of value, a transfer of resources on uneven terms, right? Because it's not an equal exchange, it's not an equal trade between two independent peoples, right? And now, one thing that I would also then add to this discussion, if we go to the origins of capitalism, it doesn't just happen inside of England or inside of Europe, right? It's happening on a world scale as Western Europe and European countries are trying to overturn an existing economic system, right? And I know you have been discussing recently with others this idea of Eurasia, right? And the reemergence of a Eurasian integrated economy. But Europe was often on the margins or the periphery of the Eurasian world system, the Indian Ocean world system, the Afro-Asian world systems. And so imperialism from the...
That's right, man. That's it. Building hospitals, imperialism. Overthrowing governments to stifle wage growth. That's the free market, baby. That's right.
The inception of capitalism was a means through which, by violence, European states were able to capture, right, the accumulated wealth of this Eurasian world system, the Afro-Asian world system, the Americas. The colonization of the Americas provides this massive quantum of primitive accumulation, right, of originary capital investment through which Europe is able to initiate its industrialization process, right? So the seizing of wealth was key from outside of Europe, was key to initiating and generating capitalist investment and development in the core, right? And so I think it provides a quantum of wealth that helps set capital markets in motion, that keeps the cost of labor low. It's key to captive markets, right? So then you have places to market the surplus from your capitalist industrialization process. And then imperialism, I think this is where you come to, Lenin. There is, I would still say, a higher stage that is reached, right? There is a moment in which, say, when you enter a stage of monopoly capitalism, that imperialism does assume a different character, right? Where there is a necessity not just simply to seize access to cheap resources, to externalize costs of production, but also a necessity to export surplus capital that cannot find sufficient profitable outlets in the core countries, to export it abroad to the peripheries, where then it can find further profitable outlets, right? So that's another component of imperialism. And so I think, maybe to summarize it all, I think imperialism is a means through which core capitalist states, right, are able to externalize costs of production through a denial of sovereignty, right, on the regions referred to as the peripheries of the capitalist world system. Mm-hmm. And so that it's fundamental. And I think, you can think about an empire, right, where there's an empire in which you might have a core region where there's a central political authority that governs it, right? But there might be marginal areas that are governed by a different political arrangement, right? And those people on the peripheries don't have access to inclusion in the political system in the core, right? And that's by design, right? It's so they cannot lay claim to the resources that are drawn from their territory, right? Because they end up in the core country. So I think that's maybe the definition that I would work with when it comes to imperialism.
No, and it's very well stated. And so I want to go to the issue of sanctions, because I think we're going to talk a bit about that. How do sanctions fit into the concept of imperialism as you just described it?
Okay, so that's really important because it has been integral to attempting to maintain the imperialist system and reproduce it in the face of challenges, in the face especially of anti-imperialism. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think one thing I would add to the discussion that I just had on imperialism is that if there's a certain property structure associated with capitalism in the core, let's say a capital labor property structure, in the peripheries, in the imperially subjugated peripheries, in the colonized territories, there were also specific property structures that were established. Right now, you can think about the system of landlordism in South Asia. You can think about the plantation economies in the Caribbean and elsewhere. So there was let's say more unfree forms of labor, other forms of, let's say, what may present themselves as feudal or pre-capitalist forms that are subjugated under capitalist world system that were a core part of the imperialist economy, right? So there's a property structure that enables the extraction of wealth from the periphery to the core, right? And so it's at the moment in which peripheral, the peripheral zones of the capitalist world system, the moment in which those who are subjugated by imperialism seek to challenge that property structure, right? Seek to overturn the logic of the plantation, right? Seek to overturn the logic of landlord power through which, let's say, cotton or wheat or other raw materials or cheap industrial inputs are extracted, right? So they're either seeking to overturn and dismantle the existing imperial property structure, or they're seeking at times to, let's say, claim ownership over it, right? Maybe not radically restructure it, but claim ownership over it so they can retain more of the value generated, let's say, from a...
Okay, folks, hello. Wish I could take a class with this guy teaching. Yeah, seriously. He's great to listen to. Something has actually just come up. I've got to go take care of something really quickly with my kid in school. Got to go drop something off at the school. What I'm going to do is just play this video. It's not going to take me a long time. I got to go for about, it's going to take me probably about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes max. So I'm going to take a little break, I guess, but I'm just going to let this video play. You know, you folks can hang out, watch the video. Should I leave you on politics tab or should I put it on, should I put it back? Is that dangerous, you think? Is that dangerous? I don't know. Should put it back. It really is the substitute teacher. Yeah. Okay, we're going back. We're abandoned ship. Abandoned ship. Okay, we're back in just chatting. We're back in just chatting. So I'll be like probably 15 minutes max. I'm going to let this video play. I'll come back and we'll hang out some more. Okay? And if anyone raids, don't let them leave. Okay? If we get any raids, don't let them leave. And encourage people to subscribe to the channel as well. So hopefully when I come back, there will be more viewers and more subs and all that stuff. That's up to you now, chat. That's up to you. This is your job. Don't let the raiders leave if they come, okay? I'll be back in like 15 minutes, okay? Talk to you soon.
Than had previously existed. So at the moment in which I think through anti-colonialism or anti-imperialism, people are able to challenge, right, the means of violence. And that's really important to remember, that imperialism and colonialism, the imperial and colonial foundations of the capitalist world system, are secured in the last instance, in the first and last instance, through violence, right? Through the superior organized violence that the West, that Europe has been able to impose on its peripheries, on its colonies, right? And so the task of the reclamation of sovereignty, the task of overturning those colonial and imperial property structures, is achieved and advanced when colonized peoples, subjugated peoples, are able to confront colonial armed violence with a greater armed violence, right? So they're able to establish a violent deterrent, let's say, to colonial violence. And I think the preeminent case of this is the Haitian Revolution. And actually, and I hope we can come back to discussing Haiti today, because I think it's actually really significant to what's going on in Latin America and elsewhere, right? But the Haitian Revolution in the 18th century, or early 19th century, I should say, is a revolution in which the enslaved population of the French colony are able to demonstrate a capacity to overthrow the existing colonial order, right? They're demonstrating a capacity to withstand the armed violence that's at the root of imperialism, at the root of colonialism, and to overturn the logic of the plantation economy that had existed at the time. And that generates what, in my view, is the first instance of modern sanctions, right? Is that the French and the Americans put a trade blockade on Haiti, right? In order to demand that Haiti pay back France for its lost property, in order to demand that Haiti provision France with access to cheap inputs, right? So it's almost to reproduce, even though Haiti is now formally independent, sanctions are a means through which, now that you cannot subjugate, the costs of subjugating Haiti through military means are maybe beyond what France can countenance, or the United States. And so you do it through your control over the world economy, right? That Haiti maybe wants to be an anti-imperial state, but the reality of the world it confronts is a world in which the world economy is still governed by, trade networks are still controlled by colonial states. And they're able to put the squeeze and deny Haiti any attempt, right, to develop its economy, right, to secure the livelihoods of its people. And so Haiti has to resubmit, right, to basically neocolonialism, right? A new imperialism. You're formally independent, but now you're economically dependent. And sanctions, I think, really demonstrates that, right? It tries to reimpose, because the colonial imperial states, even after independence, maintain a monopoly control over surplus capital on a world system scale. And they're able to deploy that monopoly control to sanction a state that challenges the imperial property structure, right? So I think that's the key functioning of sanctions historically.
It's cheating. It's cheating.
Yeah, it is cheating, and it's a means to reimpose, I think, after a state reclaims political sovereignty through economic power, right? It's a means to reimpose that value drain from periphery to core, those imperial property structures.
Or yeah, I guess like in some cases, if you think about, or like with Venezuela, it's like we can't go in militarily, so we do it this way. With Syria, they actually failed militarily with their proxy war in Syria. So now it's the primary method of trying to crush Syria is sanctions. But I'm curious, like, and maybe this is the same thing, I don't know, but how should we understand the current sanctions in the global order today in the context of neoliberalism?
Right. So I think like in the order of neoliberalism, I think there's two ways. I think in the one instance, as you would know, and your listeners and those watching your program are familiar with, is that the deployment of sanctions as a weapon, right, to reimpose imperialist logic on peripheral states has really accelerated, right, over the past few decades. And this is, I think, in large measure related to the financialization, the increasing financialization of the world economy, and the strategy of the United States, particularly from the 1970s onwards, to utilize the U.S. dollar by establishing, I guess, the U.S. dollar as the global currency, in a way in which I think no previous currency really had that capacity, right? The way in which they're able to tie the U.S. dollar to the oil market in the 1970s, and really through the recycling of petrodollars through American banks, the growing dominance of the United States over the financial and banking sectors provisions the United States with an instrument through which it can really enhance and deepen its capacity to impose sanctions on states that defy, let's say, the the property structures, the economic regime that the U.S. tries to impose on the world. So I think there was an acceleration of the use of sanctions during neoliberalism, right, to try to force states in line with the U.S. globalization project, right? And I think the neoliberalism we have to keep in mind was a political and economic project, right? And not simply to deal with an internal contradiction or crisis of overaccumulation in core states, but it was also a project to restore the political authority of Western capitalism in the face of the challenge that anti-colonialism posed, right? So we got to remember what comes before neoliberalism is the development era, right? Is the Bandung era, is the era at the very end of the NIEO, right? And I know people are speaking about the new international economic order a bit again, so this is the era that neoliberalism is responding to, right? And they're trying to once again reimpose a diminished sovereignty on the peripheries, right? And so that's often done through structural adjustment, through using debt as an instrument. But when states like Venezuela, particularly I think Venezuela is very significant because by the late 1990s in Latin America, you have states that experience some of the most severe consequences of neoliberal structural adjustment, pushing back, right, on this order and trying to do things like which are the core policy, let's say, instruments of actual decolonization, something like nationalizing resources, something like land redistribution. So these are the measures that particular states like Venezuela are attempting to advance in order to challenge the neoliberal order, right? In order to try to build out regionalism, try to build out the means through which global South states could establish substantive sovereignty, right? And then sanctions are redeployed here, right, as a means to discipline these states, right? That you can participate in the world economy, but on subordinate terms, right? You cannot disrupt the control that the U.S. exercises over the flow of oil, over the trade of oil, and so on, right? And so, I think, like in addition to Venezuela, this is something that we can clearly see also with Russia, right? I think it's really important to keep in mind again that Russia, Eastern Europe, or Russia in particular, was really severely impacted, probably more so than any other region, by neoliberalism in the 1990s, right? You have Boris Yeltsin, who again is he's like that clownish, buffoonish Trump-type figure before there ever was a Trump-type figure, right? And of the 1990s, who is essentially a U.S. Puppet, right? And really imposing that shock therapy. And it's when the Russian state tries to overturn those policies, right, in the 2000s and increasingly into 2010s, that we then see again sanctions being intensified against those states that are attempting to challenge the neoliberal ordering of the world that has as its objective, right, the reestablishment of the supremacy of the West under U.S. leadership.
That makes perfect sense. And Iran, I think you could say the same about Iran, right? As soon as Iran has a revolution, kicks out the U.S.-backed Shah, it's like sanctions begin, and they've only gotten worse since. I want to talk a bit about the evolution of sanctions, though, and you actually talked quite a bit about this in an interview you did recently. I forgot what the name of the outlet was, which I feel kind of bad about, but I'm going to actually link to it in the description because it was really good. It was you and a few other people like Max Eil, I believe.
Oh, I think the developing economics.
Yeah. So, sanctions in the past were this kind of like force multiplier of war in a way. I mean, I'm thinking about like the sanctions on Cuba, right? There was like an ongoing CIA like attempt to invade, attack, destroy Cuba after the revolution. Also many attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro and others. And in conjunction with this was the blockade, right? Which is like a huge form of sanctions. But today it seems like sanctions, rather than being like an addition to more traditional styles of warfare or even underhanded or covert styles of warfare, they are the war. Like it's like on many countries, not all of them, but on many countries, whether we're talking about, Venezuela or Iran, or like I mentioned with Syria or North Korea. I mean, these are places where the US is simply not willing to go to armed conflict, at least not right now, not necessarily willing to go in and try to assassinate someone. And so this is basically the main way. In the case of Syria, they absolutely failed to do it. So now they're using sanctions. So it really does seem like in all these places, Russia, like sanctions China sanctions are the primary method of warfare. So I'm curious if you can talk a bit about the evolution of sanctions and how, like I said, they've almost become like this primary method of warfare, and why you think that is.
Yeah, well, I think again, like I was mentioning before, I think it's become I think in many ways the emergence of sanctions as the primary method of warfare is as we were discussing earlier, it's an outcome, I think, in some ways of the success, let's say, of anti-imperialism and decolonization, right? To establish a different calculus when it comes to military intervention. Now, with that said, of course, the United States and its well, I need to keep it, I guess, professional. I was going to say European minions, but what's the
I think
more,
that's actually that's pretty generous.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I guess we could say it's generous. I mean, so the point is, I think we have to keep in mind that they have not stopped military interventions, but those are targeted at states that they spend years actually weakening with sanctions, right? So you think about, you attack Iraq, right? You attack Libya, right? After these states have already effectively been forced to demilitarize. I mean, with Libya, I guess it was almost under the idea of, okay, hey, look, we're demilitarizing, don't attack us, right? Which I think is a lesson. You can attempt to pander and appeal to the West however you may, right? But look what happens to Libya. So I think there's military intervention is still something that is deployed, but look at where it is deployed. I think that gets to the heart of your point, right? It's deployed on states that are weakened, that do not have a military deterrent capacity, right? But when you look at a state like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, you look at a state like Venezuela or Iran, where you simply do not have the means to establish, I think, your attempts to restructure, let's say, those states in ways in which their sovereignty is diminished through military means. And so that is, I think, why sanctions become the preferred instrument of imperialism. And in fact, in many ways, it's a much more effective instrument, right? Because it demonstrates to states that, okay, you may have nationalization over your resources, right? You might have a set of really potentially wealthy resources in your territory that can contribute to the development of your national economy or the uplift of your people, but they're kind of useless if you don't have access to core technologies. The kind of how can you develop them? How can you bring them to market if you don't have access to these markets? If you can't access capital markets, if you can't access investment, which you don't have because of the history of colonialism and imperialism, right? So I think it really demonstrates to these states that if you want to now participate in the world economy, you have to restructure your and it can enable, I think, the U.S. and others to avoid something like a 20-year occupation of Iraq, right? To avoid, I mean, I think, the Libyan invasion and the destruction that is imposed on Libya is in some ways the point, right? At least now you don't have a sovereign Libyan state. It may be chaotic. But in other ways, the spillover effects of Libya, what goes into Mali and the Sahel in Africa, right? Like, those are not things that are entirely within the control of Western imperialism right now, right? So I think sanctions may provide a way in which you can avoid a 10, 15-year military occupation, but still impose severe costs on the people of those territories in a similar way as you see. And I think the point of Syria is really important, right? Because Syria or elsewhere, one thing that I would add to this discussion too, that sanctions, and I mentioned this in a recent talk I gave elsewhere, that sanctions has an ideological impact as well, right? So, like, the impact of sanctions in Iran or Zimbabwe or Venezuela or Syria is something that those who may oppose Western governments don't really ever discuss, right? Like, so imagine if instead there was like a NATO attack on Iran, you would have immediate clarity of what's happened, right? But the impact of sanctions on the Iranian people is not something that generates any sort of political mobilization in the core. Instead, actually, what it enables is a representation of imperialist states as humanitarian states. Well, we are deploying sanctions in the interest of democracy. We're deploying sanctions. Look, we're not violent. We're not denying sovereignty. This is just a technical means, right, to try to establish support for democratic forces on the ground, or so forth. So I think there's also a way in which sanctions enable imperialist states to represent themselves, right, as technical neutral arbiters.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point, because also, like you said, I mean, there's almost no cost, right? It's not like you're bringing home people in body bags. It's not like people in the US see the outcome of sanctions, because it's not like CNN is going to cover the fact that Iranians are dying of like rare diseases because they can't access certain pharmaceutical medications that they aren't able to produce in their own country and can't buy because of sanctions. That's all out of sight, out of mind. So it is useful in that sense too. You'll have almost no public backlash in, these so-called, global north bourgeois democracies. But it is interesting too, like what you're saying about how it does suggest in a way some sort of like weakened or overstretched US empire, and then also speaks to that growing power in a way of post-colonial states in the global south that the US isn't able to or isn't willing to take on militarily. So they use sanctions to like try to soften them up, like you say. And I know in a recent interview, you even framed the history of sanctions as a history of counter-revolutionary colonial restoration, which you sort of mentioned something earlier in our discussion that alluded to that. But, at the same time, I've heard people make the argument that as an economic weapon, sanctions are being overused by the US and might in fact be counterproductive for imperialist goals in the long term. And not that I want to sit here and try to, give advice to the imperialists on how to do it better, but it is an interesting like conundrum in a way, because the US is sanctioning right now, for example, most of the major oil producing countries in the world. You have Russia, Iran, Venezuela. At some point, like, don't you risk creating a situation where maybe these countries start trading oil in another currency? In some cases, they already are, but on a much larger scale, for example. Or, won't this also just bring targeted states that otherwise don't really have that much in common ideologically? Like at the end of the day, Russia and Iran and Venezuela, as far as like their systems are concerned, don't have very much in common other than the fact that they are targeted by the United States. And they do, of course, like want to maintain some level of sovereignty, which is why they're targeted by the US. But it seems like there's so many things taking place, particularly in 2022, that I think we're going to see more of in 2023, where you could see these sanctions backfiring if they're not already.
Yeah, I think they definitely have. I think they're backfiring in political, like you're mentioning, in political terms, right? In that, I think the sanctions regime, right, and the way in which it's exercised again through this kind of strange, it's really a befuddling arrangement between the United States and Europe and the rest of the rest of the West, right? Which I think we'll talk about later, but. I think there's a way in which politically it's generated momentum, right, towards establishing alternative architectures of global governance, right? Mm-hmm. To whether it's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is that's not motivated, let's say, by sanctions per se, but it is motivated in many ways to establish forms through which you can discuss parameters of trade, investment, security, cooperation in ways that counter, let's say, the weight of institutions controlled by the West, right? Which again have their main aim the ongoing denial or diminishment of sovereignty for non-Western global South states, right? And so I think but the interesting thing is I don't think the United States has an option. This is the problem, right? And this is the thing is that the West and the United States are so committed to imperialism. They're so committed to maintaining unequal exchange, uneven flows of economic resources, right? That as they see a state like Venezuela, the Bolivarian project in the late 1990s and the 2000s, right? As they see this project, as they see Iran in the 1990s, right? Provisioning Hezbollah, right? With the means through which, the material means, right? Like we can talk about movements. A lot of people love to celebrate these nebulous movements, right? That have
leaderless movements. They love leaderless
movements, or people just something like BDS. It's so important, right? But it's
right, yeah.
But people love to celebrate movements that are divorced from any concrete power, that basically have as their endpoint a request from the West to be nicer. Like, can you please boycott the state for us? Can you please do this? Which is important. I'm not trying to miss it, but Like what is Iran doing in the 1990s? They're establishing a material means to overcome the Oslo framework, right? They're threatening actually the neoliberal order materially, right? And that's when the Clinton administration imposes sanctions on Iran, right? They escalate the sanctions, and their explicit purpose is because they're upset with how Iran is arming the resistance in Lebanon, right? And what this means for its regional hegemony, right? So I think even if it's backfiring, and it is, right? You're seeing increasing cooperation among sanctioned states, increasing discussion of trading core commodities in non-US denominated currencies, right? Maybe some movement towards gold, maybe some movement towards the yuan. You see this happening as deepening cooperation, but I don't think the imperialist states have a choice, because their other choice is to accept equal integration. Right? To accept, let's say, for example, a rising China or a rising Venezuela or an Iran on equal terms. Right? Now, to accept it on equal terms would mean to accept a diminishment over your monopoly power over the world economy. So what I would say is I think there definitely are contradictions. There definitely is a deepening of cooperation. A building of an alternative economic architecture is certainly in motion, right? But I don't think that matters to the imperial states.
Yeah, because there's this broader thing that's like a bigger problem. It's like what you said, it's the broader arrangement of maintaining imperialist hegemony over the world with the US at the top and everybody else underneath is the big goal. And so in the meantime, there might be some contradictions, but they have no choice. And it almost kind of suggests like they've already lost, not yet, but like on this trajectory they will have. But of course, nothing's set in stone. And and bringing it to that broader issue of trying to prevent China's rise, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that what we're witnessing now, and maybe not so much now, because I know you have some things to say about this, but at least more publicly, is the transformation or the reconfiguration of NATO into this anti-China alliance. So like when people think of NATO, they think of Russia, for obvious reasons, because that's the reason for NATO initially coming into existence, is to be this anti-Russian military alliance. But one way that it's become clear that the new Cold War is about preventing Eurasian integration, which you mentioned earlier, is the way that we're watching the US and NATO leaders talking quite openly about NATO being an anti-China alliance as well. So can you talk a bit about that? Can you talk about this reconfiguration of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? I want to emphasize North Atlantic because, again, China is far away from the Atlantic, but doesn't seem to matter. But why is this happening? And why is this so significant for Europe in particular?
Yeah, so I think this is really important. So I think one thing I just want to, maybe a bit of an aside, but I'm really interested by this one historical, I think there's there's a way we can look at history and think about how to understand NATO and US leadership over Europe, right? US control over Europe, right? How the US imposes a particular, let's say, North Atlantic logic. What is this Atlanticist logic, right? And it's...
Okay, pop quiz. Pop quiz. What have we learned? What have we learned? Have you been paying attention? Have you just been chit-chatting? Have you just been chit-chatting with one another? Are you actually watching this informative video? Come on. Let's hear it, chat. What have you learned? I think you've been goofing off. I think you've been goofing off this whole time. That's what I think. That's what I think. You're passing notes. You're knocking out work emails. You're not paying attention. Jesus. No bathroom. No. This is my Jeff Bezos arc. I'm on my Jeff Bezos arc now. Sanctions, not too good. Okay, that you passed. You passed. I think that if Taco Bell rolled back their aesthetics, they'd have a record year profit-wise. Yeah, if they brought back the sort of like the late 80s, early 90s look, I agree with that. I think that would be huge for them. That would be big business. Passing notes and smoking boats. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm back. I'm back now. Thanks for bearing with me there. I hope this video has been good. We can continue now. You know, just on the radio just a moment ago, I heard I hadn't heard this, but it's the latest single from All Time Low. They have a single called Sleepwalking, which I had never heard before. I was never really into All Time Low. They kind of came around like after I'd kind of aged out of the whole pop punk world. But there was one of those songs I heard it on the radio. I was like, who's this? What's going on here? I approve. Pretty good single from All Time Low. Thank you, Sean. I timed out some guy named Fact-Based Comrade who has homework to present his favorite fact in one day. Okay. China is right in the middle of all the U.S.'s bases. That makes them a NATO threat. Should have thought of that before you made your country China. That's right. I'm glad you've been paying attention to this video. Heroic Skeleton. That is the takeaway. Okay, now that we're up to speed, here we go.
North Atlantic, right? And it's North Atlantic for a reason, I think. And it is a projection of power, right? So there was a Haitian anthropologist, Michel Rolfe-Triot, who wrote in one of his texts that the colonization of the Americas transformed or reconfigured the way Europe apprehended its relations with its others in Africa and Asia as well. Right. So, I promise I'm going to come to the NATO question contemporarily.
I believe you. I'm sitting back. I'm excited for this.
Okay.
Dylan Burns fan.
What's really interesting is, like if you think about, there was a logic.
Does North Atlantic just mean white people? That is true. Yeah.
Right.
No, it's about the people that follow the rules. Okay, and we're on the side of good. We're on the side of good. And we follow all the rules, and we care about human rights and democracy. And it just so happens that all those countries are predominantly white former colonizer countries, and it's a total coincidence. It's a total coincidence, okay, Quinn?
Was a rejection of the treaty that the British Crown signed with Indigenous people in the Americas, right? The Royal Proclamation, which was a respect, right, of
good truth, justice, and the American way, which just so happens to be apartheid.
Eastern Divide, right? And the U.S. settlers were like, wait, that's outrageous. How can you say we're not allowed to steal any more land? This is the foundation of this country, right? It's founded on rejecting a treaty between the Crown and Indigenous peoples, right?
Very
so
fitting.
you know the broken treaties, whether we're thinking Minsk, right? If you look at Minsk treaty, it's really interesting because there's an attempt, right? There's an attempt there to think through, right? Germany, France, Russia, to think through an alternative to Atlanticism, right? To think about a Eurasian future, right? And we know who torpedoed the Minsk treaty. Right, and we know, like
yes, we do.
Either the understandings and the consensus with China and the West when it comes to Taiwan or elsewhere. The United States is often at the forefront of undermining existing treaties. But so I think I just wanted to mention as a bit of an aside to begin with that I think the Atlanticist logic, right, that what drives the United States, right, is a certain, I think, expansionary colonial imperial logic that is totally unrestrained, right? And it's not trying to say European colonizers historically were, let's say, a better type of colonialism. That's not the point. But there's something, I think, historically we can find that was particularly unrestrained and expansionary about U.S. settler colonialism and its translation into world imperialism. Right. And I think that's something that's just interesting to think about in the midst of all of this is what do we mean by Atlanticism? What is the logic underpinning it? Right. That seems to totally deny or diminish the existing history of relations between Europe, Africa, and Asia that do have a longer history, not on colonial or imperial terms, right? There may be a potential for an integration, for a set of cooperation, but there's a history, I think, of a settler colonial eliminationist domination supremacist logic that the United States returns to. That's constitutive of the U.S. leadership of the West, right?
Interesting.
So what I will say about NATO and China, and I just want to read something out on this, is that this is not something, I think we've been hearing a lot of anxiety and worries about the West, about the rise of China, especially since Obama declared his pivot to, Obama and Hillary Clinton in 2009, 2010, when they're like, what's happening? We need to pivot to Asia. Of course, by then it's way too late because, they've been in their own, end of history supremacism. The United States is thinking they can just go into Iraq, Afghanistan, and just bulldoze across the world. And then they get wind of,
Not this
China
time.
has built up they've laid the foundations for a world economy independent of U.S. power, right? So that's, you've heard rising concerns about China over the last decade, but even in 2005, and before I read this, the context, I think this is an article in The Atlantic written by Robert Kaplan. Robert Kaplan is a U.S. foreign policy bigwig, right? But definitely like an influential thinker when it comes to U.S. Foreign policy circles, right? So what's happening in 2005, right? We got to remember, this is the Iraq War. What was France and Germany's reaction to the Iraq War? They were really like, wow, the United States is actually the big problem in the world, right? You had, of course, the Bush-Blair, before Europe, minion, I don't know if poodle is the better word, but, the UK are always the faithful, I think, follower of the Americans. So at that time, but besides the British state, I think you had at that time a certain revulsion and a really a fundamental loss of legitimacy of U.S. leadership in 2005, right? And there is increasing discussions between France and Germany and China and Russia at the time about the need to...
And France and Germany, despite learning this basic lesson in 2004, France and Germany are still just the lapdog of this collapsing empire. They still just can't disentangle themselves from these fucking Americans. And they're literally shooting themselves in their own feet at the behest of the U.S. State Department, these countries who in 2004 quite correctly realized which way the winds were blowing and who was the belligerent nation in the geopolitical world. They correctly figured this out, and they just can't get away. Very sad, pathetic behavior. Canada can't get away either, but at least we're open about the fact that we idolize and worship the United States. We don't try to be better. France and Germany kind of sometimes claims that they're better. Canada doesn't even make any effort to do this.
Develop security arrangements independent of the United States, right? And just immense criticism of the United States unilateralism and its hubris, right, in defying any form of international consensus on the invasion of Iraq, right? And I think it's important to keep in mind here too that prior to the invasion of Iraq, somebody like Vladimir Putin was not a radical in trying to challenge the existing order. He was trying to integrate Russia on equal terms into the order. And when
he was doing what he thought he was supposed to,
that's a moment in which I think the Russian state, for example, is really taken aback. And it's just really shocked that the United States would actually go ahead with this. And so this is it's a moment in which the U.S. is maybe having...
And Harley, yes, I just saw that as well. New Insurgents just dropped right now. We have a conversation, very funny episode with Ricky and Elliot from Internet Today, which you can listen to on... Oh, fucking Chris, I can't type there. Why not? I don't know. Where are you, chat? There's the podcast. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, subscribe there. Get it on all your podcast apps. Okay? That's where you do it. Very funny conversation with Ricky and Elliot from Internet Today.
Coming to terms or confronting a Europe it may be losing, right? And what does it have to offer Europe, right? Like, again, the U.S., I think some of Piketty's recent work emphasizes that there's absolutely zero public wealth in the United States. So much of U.S. wealth is tied up in obviously the military industrial complex, but what sort of actually productive investments could the U.S. bring to Europe, right? Like it's increasingly becoming clear by the mid 2000s that this relationship is maybe one that Europe maybe needs to consider developing its own independent security arrangement, independent of NATO. And so at this time, Kaplan writes a piece where he emphasizes, actually, he's basically saying, the title of the piece is How We Would Fight China in 2005.
Wow.
Right? And he's identifying, even though the United States is in Iraq and Afghanistan, he's identifying China by 2005 as actually the primary threat to continued U.S. predominance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his argument is a familiar argument today, but it's that NATO will be necessary. It's through NATO that Europe can be brought back in line with U.S. leadership, right? So what he basically says is that the resurgence of NATO would be an indispensable war-fighting instrument in America's war with NATO. NATO is ours to lead, unlike the increasingly powerful European Union, whose own defense force, should it become a reality, would inevitably emerge as a competing regional power, one that might align itself with China in order to balance against us. NATO and an autonomous European defense force cannot both prosper. Only one can.
Okay.
And we should want it to be the former, so that Europe is a military asset for us, not a liability as we confront China, right? So I think and that's really important to keep in mind, right? Because I think a lot of folks who were critical of U.S. imperialism 10 years ago or 15 years ago have really dropped that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's become this emphasis on this inter-imperialism or these this rivalry between
sub-imperialism or something. Yeah.
So, but whether it's China or Syria, we also have to keep in mind that the imperialist state of the U.S. has targeted these states for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And so I think NATO was perceived as a
that's been the big rhetorical
Europeans,
coup, right? Is not only obscuring what America is doing, but then suggesting that this whole shift, framing this whole global power shift right now, like we were seeing with China, framing anything that these countries do to rival U.S. imperialism as, it's just another form of imperialism. That's China. When they're doing the Belt and Road Initiative, well, that's imperialism too, So we can't, I'm anti-imperialist, and obviously I'm against America and its roles and, overthrowing governments and the coups and the invasions and and I'm also against this other kinds of imperialism as well. It allows people to have this kind of fake, nuanced view of these issues while not taking the much more risky and much more controversial belief in standing up for these states that are constantly being framed in this way and constantly being demonized in our media in this way. Yeah, exactly. That's part of the colonial kind of mentality, right, Johnny? Any country as large as ours must be doing the same things we did to get that bag. That's right. And when they move into other places, obviously they're subjugating people and exploiting people in the same way that we are, of course, because that's human nature. That's our colonial mentality. It's also the same thing, the same way in Israel, the way they talk about the Palestinians. If we make a one state, if we have a one state solution and the Palestinians have equal representation, they're going to do to us what we did to them. If we give land back to indigenous people in Canada, the US, they're going to do to us what we did to them. Right? It's taking our own fucking colonizer mentality and applying it on every single other country and every single other culture, regardless of the historical context. Yes, I'm anti-imperialist, and I support the U.S. bombing the imperialists across the world. That's right. It's by that stretch, then it's anti-imperialist to oppose all of America's enemies, because they're all imperialist as well. There you go. And that's how you're allowed to enjoy being an empire baby and enjoy all the fruits of the empire while not really advocating anything. It's being seriously advocating about any shift to that kind of global power. That's how you sleep at night. Everyone is as violent, greedy, and nihilistic as we are, for sure. Yeah. That's the mentality.
Security, you can present to the Europeans that we will ensure your security, right? But how was that going to happen? So what are the steps through which you are going to bring the Europeans
Well, that's
back
it,
on
Heroic Skeleton. That's right. Yeah. Funny how all these against all imperialism equally folks always tend to eat up U.S. propaganda about China uncritically. That's right. Yeah. I am anti-imperialist, so I'm against the American empire, but I also believe every single
count on me. You're gonna have
thing
good old
that is
Rob
said
to talk you through all this.
about these official enemy countries. Hello, really chill guy. Thank you so much. Look at that, 26 entire months of loyalty from really chill guy. Thank you, sir. And once again, folks, I it's not a piss badge. As I mentioned a few moments ago, I keep typing there and I can't. As I keep mentioning, new episode of Insurgents just dropped. Please download it from the link in the chat. Please subscribe to that podcast. It's very good. Our conversation with Ricky and Elliot from Internet Today was very, very good stuff. What were you saying earlier about Jordan bending the knee or kissing the ring? I don't believe I ever said anything like that. No, I don't think that's accurate. I don't recall ever saying anything like that. Yeah, I'm well aware that the Pentagon and the U.S. is an unreliable source of information about everything except this. Yeah, exactly. Or like when it comes to the Russian-Ukraine thing. Look, this time they're getting it right. Okay, this time we got to trust them. I feel like Rob did say that. That is not true. That is not accurate. I'm being set up. This is a frame job. It's a frame up.
side. But here's where I think the 2007 Munich Security Conference, here's where I think when the Bush administration starts to speak of expanding NATO into Georgia and Ukraine, crossing Russia's red lines, I think
weird how they didn't like that.
A conflict in Europe, right? That would really, really push European states to have to decide, right? Like, and to come back into
it's
the
crazy
NATO
that
fold,
Russia was opposed to that
with no other choice of an alternative security arrangement.
That's been the biggest sense of like collective amnesia, and the most frustrating thing during the course of this like Russia and Ukraine war. Just this complete ignoring of this context. Like he's pointing out, Russia tried to integrate into the global system. They wanted to join NATO. They wanted to join our special club. Okay, and we said no, you're not allowed. While we were also going into Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya and all these other countries. And they said, okay, fine, I guess we won't. And then not only do we say, no, you can't be in our special club, but we're going to continue expanding NATO, even after you've tried to integrate into our system. We're going to continue expanding right up to your borders. And we're just like, I can't believe that they're getting mad about this. They're so, with their typical Russian death drive, or their Russian genes are leading to this warlike anger and violence. It must be the reason. And completely ignoring the now 20 years of like provocation after provocation after provocation after provocation from us. And it's just a mystery. Again, just like it's a mystery why countries in the global south or Latin America or Africa would want to join the Belt and Road Initiative and don't want anything to do with U.S. style development. It's a mystery. That's a mystery, and it's also just a mystery. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? We just can't. It's the illegal, unprovoked invasion. It's just a complete mystery. We don't know. We don't know why they're doing this. There's no way of knowing. You know, it's amazing just the refusal for people to accept basic facts about not even the past, but like the recent past, like the last 10, 20 years. Like, how are we supposed to come to some kind of consensus about any big geopolitical event or foreign policy situation if we can't even agree about the facts of what happened the last couple of decades and the impact that it has? Or we're going to pretend that it didn't have an impact. It's bizarre to me. Seriously, it's bizarre. It's just a total mystery why this is happening. It's illegal. It's the illegal, unjustified, unprovoked invasion. And that's what they say. You know, how are we supposed to have an actual discussion about this if that's the viewpoint people have on it? It's strange to me.
I think that was maybe, these are things that I think require some more study and theorization, but we can see the steps through which then Europe is brought back into the fold, how the Libyan invasion is really a core moment in the reestablishment of NATO, actually, right? As not just a Atlanticist arrangement, right, but a projection, right, of Western imperialist power under U.S. leadership, right? An attempt to re-legitimize U.S. imperialism after its delegitimization.
I've literally had a friend try to tell me that the DPRK is a more war-obsessed culture than the U.S. And even if you want to make that case, obviously in the DPRK they do prioritize the military and they do spend a lot on their military. You know, I don't think that's not in dispute. Not nearly as much as the United States, of course. A fucking drop in the bucket compared to what the United States spends, but clearly they do prioritize that. But why? You know, why do they prioritize it? The United States killed 3 million people in Korea. And I say we because Canada helped them. You know, we've been on their border for the last 7 years aiming nukes at their country. We bombed the entire country. We killed 3 million people. Yeah, they prioritized their military. It's called trying to defend themselves. You know, why are they not allowed to do that? It's really, really strange. I don't know how many countries practice invading the U.S., but I hardly hear about it. Yeah, it's like they carry on these war games every single year right on their border of the country that they bombed into fucking the Stone Age and starved intentionally and have been starving intentionally with this kind of siege mentality. This like barbaric medieval siege of the blockades and the trade embargoes and the sanctions like they're talking about. I can't believe they'd prioritize their military spending. It's just a mystery to me why they would do this. You know, it's the same thing. I don't get what the disconnect is. Yeah, defense in the DPRK actually means defense. Yeah, and indigenous people were also depicted as warlike, and it's like, gee, I wonder why. I mean, it's that classic like Victorian era agitprop piece that's like civilization versus tyranny or savagery. And civilization is when you have the British colonial guy beating the shit out of someone, and savagery is when that person is beating the shit out of them. That's the difference. It's the same mentality. It's that same colonialist mentality that's been going. It's changed shape and it's changed form, but it's the exact same mentality. Like creating all these different trends, animating them. It is yet again, Moss, what no materialism does to an MF. You simply hate to see it. Yeah, just still doing the same dehumanization shit to justify their own barbarism. That's right. It's like they do this. You talk about the colonization of Latin America and how we talk about the Aztecs. Oh, they did human sacrifice. So they basically deserved it, right? They were a violent culture of these backwards, violent, barbarians, and we brought them civilization, even though we killed 10 million, millions and millions, tens of millions of people in the process. For some reason, that doesn't count as being a human sacrifice. When you sacrifice tens or hundreds of millions of people towards creating this colonial empire, that's okay. But, oh boy, they did human sacrifices, so they basically deserve to be subjugated and genocided. Their entire culture is just completely wiped off the face of the earth. All their history, all their tradition, all their art, all their huge, vast cities just completely wiped away. But they did human sacrifices, though, so... And it's the same thing with the indigenous in Canada and the United States. Everywhere that colonialism has ever been, that's how people are discussed. Like U.S. movies have to fantasize about the U.S. being invaded or destroyed by a foreign entity in video games, TV shows, books, and conspiracy to make some sort of narrative that the U.S. is benevolent and just. Yeah, and to justify all their defense. All their vast intelligence networks and their vast military-industrial complex. spending on bombs and missiles and guns and all that stuff. Well, we might be invaded. These are countries that actually have been invaded. They actually were invaded. The new Top Gun didn't even name the enemy. But wasn't it like, I still haven't seen it, oddly enough, as much, you know, I'm a big Top Gun fan, even though it is a horrible Western propaganda. I haven't seen the new one yet. But isn't it Iran? Isn't it basically like Iran? They're building nukes, so we got to stop them. And it totally it talks about like the Iran deal, and talks about how they violated the deal and like they got all the money from the deal and everything like that, and totally like misrepresents what actually happened with the Iran deal and who left it. Yeah, uranium enrichment facility in the mountains. Yeah. It's amazing how brazen it is. Just completely rewriting, again, not ancient history, recent history. Not even the last 10, 15 years, the last 5 years. You're rewriting that history as well. You know? The state, they count on people having this level of short memory here in the West, and they're correct. They do. It's simply the rogue nation. I still want to see it. I mean, I love the movies. I love the horrible propaganda slop. Don't get me wrong, but are they upping the imperialist propaganda media because opinion is so low? I don't know. I mean, I think faith and the opinion of a lot of things are in jeopardy, but faith in the American military and the American global dominance is probably as strong as ever. Because they were too dependent on their capital to make China the baddie. Quite emblematic of the current war drive against them. Well, just like in that movie that we watched this invasion scene sometimes of. It's the remake, Red... What's the fucking movie? Wasn't it with Patrick Swayze? I've never actually seen it. It is a huge wave of reaction because neoliberalism is crumbling. That's right. Yeah, Red Dawn. That's a good point, Biggerwig. Red Dawn. It's like originally China was the villain in that movie and they changed it to North Korea. But in Top Gun, though, didn't they... I think in the original film, they took out like a Taiwan patch for that reason, but in this, they had it. Didn't they have him like wearing a Taiwan patch in this movie? So it's like they are starting to get more brazen when it comes to that kind of stuff. Yeah, I've never seen it. I've never seen that or the remake, although we watched the trailer of the remake a bunch of times on this stream whenever we want to get a nice little laugh. When we see the beautiful sight of the paratroopers representing the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, parachuting in to liberate and rescue the citizens of America. The heroes who parachute into any town USA to try and bring some kind of civilization to these Americans and are then spat upon and killed for their efforts. But it is sometimes funny to watch that, though. Just that part. Both versions of Red Dawn are hilarious because they're so ridiculous. We should watch them sometime. We should watch it sometime. Anyway, let's continue this video. I'm also going to get some kind of little snack situation.
In the 2000s under the Bush administration, and as an aside, it's important also to look at, if I was an imperialist in the United States, I would prefer the Democratic administration to the Republican administration.
They're more effective.
But if you look under Democratic administrations, Obama, Clinton, Biden, there's much less opposition to U.S. imperialism, right? It becomes re-legitimized as something else, right? And then in the 2010s, Libya and elsewhere, the United States has an explicit strategy, right? What they call in Libya leading from behind, right? Elsewhere, they call it a signature reduction policy, where they don't want to explicitly be seen, right, to be bumbling around the world and imposing itself, that NATO is more a means to preserve a rules-based order. It's not a means of attacking and invading states, right? And I think they sought to re-legitimize that through Libya, but the target was always, I think, China, right? And we look at AFRICOM on the African continent, right? We look at the rise of U.S. special military operations on the African continent over the last 10 years. This is the means through which it's competing with rising Chinese investments that provide states across the global south and even Europe at the time, right, on alternative to dependence upon U.S. capital, U.S. military umbrella that diminishes those states' sovereignties, right? So I think there's a targeting of China for a particular reason, right? Because even within Europe, China was providing an alternative, right? And U.S. hegemony, U.S. imperial power has been premised upon controlling the levers of the balance of power in Europe, right? Since at least World War II, and prior to World War II, that's how the British exercised their hegemony, right? Who controls the balance of power on the European continent, right? And so by getting the Europeans to, I think, to re-subordinate themselves through NATO, right?
Yeah.
It provides the Americans with the legitimacy, with the political capital, with the access to extra resources, right? Whether it's military fighting bodies in Eastern Ukraine, or actually military resources by getting, say, Germany to up its military expenditures, right, for a potential coming fight with China, right? And I think this is important because every time that the European continent has appeared to be going a different way, the U.S. has. Like, let's keep in mind in the 1970s, right? German economic competition is rising, and who is the target of the United States deal with the Saudis in the 1970s, right? The rise of the petrodollar, right? This is a way that you really keep Germany in line by, if Germany might be outcompeting you. And this is a story of the United States. It's often outcompeted economically, but it's able to, through coercive measures, force even its allies in a subordinate position, right? So I think keeping Europe under its foot has been really important for the United States in projecting its power beyond the West, right? And I think the promise it gives to Western countries is, hey, this will enable us to continue to draw a surplus from the rest of the world. And even though we control these processes much more, you will still benefit from them in some ways, right? But yeah, so I think definitely I would argue that even in large measure the Ukraine war and the rising I think conflict with Russia is.
Oh, sorry. One sec. One moment. Johnny, talking about Hunt for Red October, saying actually based on a sub that thought the Soviet government had become revisionist, if I remember correctly, which again is something we should support. I believe that's what the new season of Jack Ryan is, though. Last season of Jack Ryan was about woke girl boss, gender swapped Guaido in Venezuela. That was the last season of Jack Ryan, which is literally just, I think we can take a look at Jack Ryan as just being straight up CIA propaganda. Like, they barely even disguised that. Office Jim or whatever talked about when he was promoting Jack Ryan about how he visited the CIA office and how he thinks they're heroes, and it's basically just straight up CIA propaganda, framing their attempts at subversion like the way that they want. It's like fan fiction. It's like CIA fan fiction. It's like, this is how it should have gone. When you talk about Venezuela, their failed Venezuela regime change operation that began under Trump and just absolutely collapsed, it never worked. But what if it was like this, though? And that's what I believe that's what the new season is about, though. It's about these former Russian Soviets want to set off a nuke and reestablish the Soviet Union. And it's once again, it's Jack Ryan, and I'm like, these people sound pretty fucking. I think we should hear them out. I think we should hear what they have to say. And then you've got Office Jim running around, putting his life on the line to stop this from happening. That's what it is. It's like, we must reestablish the Soviet Union. And Jack Ryan is like, no! We worked so hard to make sure all those people in Eastern Europe weren't getting an education anymore. We must stop this. I think the more left you go, the more the villains in these kind of action movies and TV series and whatever, especially in like the 80s and 90s, the more these people end up looking like the heroes, the actual heroes. Whatever happened to those half-assed mercenaries that tried to invade Venezuela and were caught by fishermen? I think they're still there. I'm still holding on hope of a second, better USSR coming post-Putin. We can hope. We have to believe in something, Johnny. My long shot theory about all that is that's why I've been supportive of the burgeoning relationship and the coalition with China and Russia, is just the idea that eventually China is going to be able to pull them back in that direction. I don't think that's going to happen overnight. And, they have this policy of not really interfering in people's political systems. They have a kind of like a non-interference policy or strategy, but that's my long shot dream for the next couple of decades, is that they could eventually kind of pull them back onto the socialist path. Maybe that's cope. I don't know. Maybe it is. But I still believe I'd like to still believe that that's a possibility.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
The battle at Lake Changjin is the most accurate portrayal of the U.S. military.
Thanks, Dimitri. I still haven't seen that. I would really like to. Last night I did start watching RRR though, and which I had still not seen. And it's really interesting, this rise of foreign films that depict, colonizer countries as like the bad guys, just like the completely non-nuanced view of these colonizer countries. That's something really interesting that's starting to crop up in these popular foreign films. It'll take a long process, and there's a lot of reactionary shit to uproot out of Russia, but maybe a stable country, an ally, can help. Yeah, this is kind of my long shot hope, that Western belligerents kind of forced Russia to take up this kind of anti-West position, and forced these two enemies back together, these former allies that became enemies, forced them back together. Our own belligerents did this. And maybe it'll eventually even force them to go back on that socialist path. That would be the ultimate failure of the imperialists. Free antenna TV stations like 80% propaganda and law procedurals and true crime. For sure. The propaganda is crazy. When you start to notice that, it's every night, night after night. Even a lot of my favorite things, my favorite movies, my favorite films. It's just everywhere. It's relentless. Okay, let's continue this video.
A first step in an attempt to subjugate China more broadly.
Yeah, and I actually, building off of what you're saying, which is actually a really important argument you're making here, about the relationship between Europe and the U.S. and what's really going on. The last time I had you on, we talked a lot about sovereignty, which is something that you have expertise in, the issue of sovereignty. But mostly we talked about it in the context of the global South. And so as this war in Ukraine continues to drag on, and Europe is being pressured by the U.S. to implement policies that are very clearly against European interests, in order to weaken Russia and China, whether we're talking about sanctions on Russia and Europe having to cut off gas from Russia when they don't have the infrastructure to bring in gas from elsewhere. That's like really doing horrible things to European industry, particularly in places like Germany, potentially in France and Italy. And also, China is Europe's greatest trading partner. It surpassed the U.S. in that respect years ago. And so by trying to force Europe...
Australia as well. And Australia is like, of course, we'll continue antagonizing this country.
With Europe's own ability to have like a running economy. So I'm wondering, do you think that European countries have sovereignty? And maybe a good way to start that conversation is, can you just very briefly explain, like, what does sovereignty mean?
Yeah, so I think the sovereignty in the classical kind of international relations literature approach, there's two components to sovereignty, right? If we go even in the field of, say, political science more generally, right? To establish sovereignty, and this is I think the definition that many would critique, right? Like okay, so sovereignty is not a good thing actually, but which I would disagree with. But the one element of the definition of sovereignty is the establishment of a, let's say, monopoly of control over the deployment of violence within a defined territory, right? And I think what that does is it enables a political authority, right? It enables a political, let's say, institution, a political community to establish then control over the resources of that territory, right? To be able to direct sovereign control, independent control.
Oh, absolutely, Dimitri. The stuff about the Australian coup. It goes back to what I was saying yesterday and what I was saying in that TikTok I put out today, or the YouTube short that I put out from the stream yesterday. Do we live in a democracy, really? When even Australia votes for a mild social democrat, the U.S. steps in and says, no, you can't do that. So even if you do things organized the right way and elect left-wing leaders that you think are going to solve the problems in the way that you want, it's like the U.S. comes in and says, no. Not allowed.
Of any other power outside of that territory over those resources, right? Now, of course, that could be a really negative sovereignty when we think about things like equity, development, justice, right? So sovereignty can have a class character too, where what is the class in that territory that's exercising sovereign control over those resources? But I think a key component is that sovereignty is defined within that territory by a power existing within that territory over there, and that it has established, I think, a monopoly over violence and authority in that territory. And then there's an external component to sovereignty in the sense that to really exercise strong sovereignty is to be recognized by other sovereigns who are exercising sovereignty over their own discrete territories, that they recognize your sovereignty over the territory, right? So they recognize that and they do not impinge upon your sovereignty. So this is, I think, two elements of sovereignty. And then, there's been increasing discussion, especially in the settler colonies, over indigenous conceptions of sovereignty, which often have to do with reclamation of control over land and resources. But what I would say, and this is obviously not what we're talking about right now, what's often missing from these conversations is the hard power question, right? That it's often like a feel-good story of indigenous sovereignty, of reclaiming land and putting all this on the table.
This is
but
some
not
guy,
really
Rob
confronting
Russo,
the
some
reality of
leftist
the
based in
power of
Canada.
settler.
I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hello, hello, Majority Report. Hello. What's up? Thank you for the raid. Majority Report. What is up? It's your boy, Rob, I guess. I don't know. Thank you, Raiders. Please smash the follow button. I'm Rob. You might know me from Twitter. I'm a socialist Twitch streamer here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Co-host the Insurgents podcast with Jordan Ewell. We just put out a great episode today with Ricky and Elliot from Internet Today. Make sure you check that out. Smash the follow button. Thanks for joining the channel. Thanks for joining the stream. We're just watching this video talking about just basically the U.S.'s shifting role in the world, and the way that the United States tries to economically control and exploit other countries using sanctions. The way that these sanctions are kind of starting to backfire for the U.S. and how that's a sign about this kind of shifting geopolitical power struggle. That's what we're talking about today, and we're watching this clip from Breakthrough News. Very interesting discussion. Thanks again for joining us. We continue with the video now.
Colonial states that you also have to confront, right? Which brings us back then again to that core element of sovereignty, which is having the means to which you can establish sovereign control over your territory and your resources, right? Now, in that sense, is Europe sovereign? I think is an interesting interesting question. Right now, I think a discussion of sovereignty in Europe is really complicated.
They're not. They're committing economic suicide at the behest of the State Department.
That might say we don't have the same sovereignty as Germany within the setup of the European Union, right? And we can look at the way in which the United States initially backed, right, a
brand new valued community member, Bono bin Laden,
union and a growing political integration in Europe, right, as a means through which the United States could continue, I think, to both find outlets for its own capital, but also to construct, I think, a European Union that would be subservient to U.S. geopolitical objectives vis-a-vis the Soviet Union, right? Like, I think that was one element, I think, of U.S. backing of this. So I think it's complicated within the European Union. Some states might exercise more economic sovereignty than others over their territories. But I think like there's maybe a third component to sovereignty we can think about, which is like a supra sovereignty, right? So you might exercise internal sovereignty. You might be recognized as sovereign, but then there's a commanding height level, right? Which is where we get into something at the policy space. Do you have total independence, right, with which you can structure your relations with other states, right? And this is, I think, where Europe maybe does fail the test of sovereignty, right? And I think there have been tendencies or trajectories in Europe to get out of the U.S. security umbrella, right? The U.S. security framework.
No, of course, Europe is sovereign. Of course, Latin America is sovereign. Of course, Africa is sovereign. As long as you do what the United States State Department instructs you to do, as long as what you do with the World Bank tells you to do, and you take their loans, and they say you need to cut social spending and you need to go after the trade unions, it means you have to not raise the minimum wage from 30 cents to 60 cents an hour, whatever it is, whatever they tell you. As long as you do what you're told, then you can be sovereign. Then you're sovereign, right? And when you're no longer sovereign is when you start saying no. When you start telling the United States that you're not interested in doing business with them anymore. NATO has voluntary membership. Thank you, Moist Towelettes. Yeah, and so if you trade with someone we don't like, oh my, are you ever going to not be sovereign after that? Yeah, that's it. No, you're sovereign as long as you do what you're told. And then you're sovereign. That's how that works.
This has been a decades-long process. I think...
Again, it's something else I talked to BJ Prashad about.
With Vijay, there was a discussion of Gaullism in France, right? Which is really interesting because when de Gaulle is actually talking...
As long as you're going to be the subordinates. As long as you're going to be the subordinates of the West, or the coolies, as Vijay put it. You know? Then it's okay. Then we're not going to complain about anything that you're doing. You're not going to complain about your human rights. We're not going to complain about authoritarianism or free press or democracy as long as you're the subservient to the West, subservient to our economic interests. The moment you're not, though, at the moment any of these countries actually stands up to us, that's when we really start to talk about all these issues. That's when all these things become these values of freedom and humanitarianism become very important to us.
About some of this stuff, the
that's
United
the colonial
States is
mentality
preparing to overthrow him in a coup d'état, right? So I think they have often been very wary of European attempts to establish, like Kaplan was saying, an independent defense force of the United States, right? And that's why I think there's so much discussion right now that the United States doesn't say, hey, we're doing this to reestablish our control over Europe, right? We're doing this to reestablish our control. We're doing this for the West, which is really interesting. I think for some people, they should grapple with this, who are really uneasy with discussions today of multipolarism, who are really uneasy with discussions of the challenge to U.S. hegemony, is that the Ukraine war and the U.S. Interventions into Europe are reframed as a rebirth of the West, right? It's often like, hey, this is about the West. This is about all of us, right? Which is really, if you're non-Western, should be quite frightening language for you to hear because...
Finland very recently had a swastika as the symbol of their air force, so I'm surprised they're not joining NATO. Didn't I have a guy on time come in here and start telling me that, that wasn't a fascist thing? I had a vague memory of someone defending the Finland swastika to me. I thought they were joining NATO though, aren't they? I thought Finland was joining NATO. Am I crazy? Did I imagine that? It's just a swastika, bro. It's just impossible to change the symbol. That's right. BBC reporting Finland's talks on hold. Sweden is going through some pro-Quran burning phase and Turkey is opposed. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, it's no surprise that they want to. I guess that was one of the whole arguments as well when it comes to the invasion of Ukraine by Putin. You know, I think people in this chat sometimes are pretty understanding of like the context and the things that led to it in the first place, while not defending any of the violence or anything that's happened. I think one of the criticisms that I've made, you know, in addition to all the horrible things that happen in any war, no matter whether you find it justified or not, but the fact that it's almost strengthened NATO's position in a way. It's strengthened all the anti-Russia countries. It's strengthened the white supremacist militias. NATO is growing. There's more countries trying to join NATO. They're trying even more to go right up to their borders now. Unless you think it's a good thing, unless people think that it's a good thing to just like get all those cards on the table and to initiate the kind of early steps to a more substantial conflict with the West, which I can understand as well.
What interest do people in the majority of the world have in the rebirth of the West and the revitalization of that political or civilizational construct that has subjugated and immiserated the majority of the world, right? But that's how the U.S. is framing it, right? Is in terms of a Western rebirth, right? Which, you know, I would say that's like a white supremacist rebirth as well. But it is, I think, that Europe does have a diminished sovereign capacity when it comes to establishing relations with other, say, powers outside of the U.S. orbit, whether that's China, whether that's Russia, even
the contradictions are indeed heightening.
States, right?
Maybe
that was the point
or even
all
Iran,
along.
you could say too, because Europe certainly was
Very
very
good
much
point.
interested in going back to the Iran nuclear deal, and it was really the U.S. that has been sabotaging that all this time. But so, okay, let's say it's like a spectrum of sovereignty, right? And some states are allotted more access to independence or a higher level of independence than others, like the way you described it. Then there's a huge difference then between like how much sovereignty Germany and France have, for example, versus like Haiti and Zambia.
Yeah. Like I think most definitely, right? I think, and some elements of that, I think a core element of that come to the legacy of the colonial and imperial world in which we live. That's 5 centuries, 2 centuries in the making, right? In different places. So I think like a Zambia or a Haiti, right, have a fundamental deficit in access to investable resources and access to capital markets that a Germany or France does not have in the same way, right? Although we are seeing that there is a severe, I think, limitation for European countries to have access to energy resources, which is a problem that the United States doesn't have, right? But I think most definitely that Haiti and a Zambia, they definitely don't have access to the depth, let's say.
Nixon Plumber says, but if the Belt and Road Initiative goes to Berlin as planned, then their sovereignty grows. No? Are you talking about Germany's? I mean, yeah, I would imagine so, but I would also know that there's elements within the U.S. State Department that are going to throw their bodies on the tracks to prevent that from ever happening. And there's a political establishment in Germany that if America instructs them to not make these kinds of deals, then they won't fucking do it. And with support of Germany and France over this like proxy war in Ukraine is the ultimate example of that. Hey, Lana, how's it going? We're learning about sanctions.
Let's say of capital that a Germany or France would have, so they're not as dependent, like or they are more dependent. Let's say Zambia or Haiti are much more dependent on the existing, let's say, U.S. Leadership over or control over capital and financial
Whoever
markets.
blew up the Nord Stream pipeline will never allow Germany in the BRI. I mean, yeah. And there's simply no way of knowing who did it. That's the unfortunate thing. We'll just never know. I know the US has some of their top people looking into who committed this egregious act of sabotage, the Nord Stream pipeline, but unfortunately I just don't think there's ever going to be any concrete solutions, any concrete answers to this mystery wrapped in an enigma of who did this, who carried out this act. Clearly Russia sabotaged their own pipeline, of course. That's been one of the funny things about seeing the reaction to some of the, and just anything that happens, right? Russia bombed their own people. They bombed their own pipeline. It's a mystery wrapped in enigma. Let's get Colombo in to investigate this old Nord Stream pipeline. All right, America. I understand you didn't blow up the pipeline. I've been wasting your time this whole time. I'm going to take my leave. Oh, but just one more thing. You say that Russia blew up their own pipeline. Why would Russia bomb a key vital piece of infrastructure, an economic prosperity, an essential cog in their economic prosperity?
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Oh my goodness gracious. Christine, thank you so much for the whopping 10 gifted subs. Wow. Wow. That is so very kind of you. I just love seeing that alert every single time. It gets me every time. Gets me every time. Christine,
wow.
thank
Okay,
you.
Rob. Seriously, wow.
Oh my goodness gracious. Oh my goodness. Creating this alert is like the best thing I've ever done in this community. I can't imagine that this is going to work every single day. Like, right, it can't. There's no way. There's no way that it can work every single day. But Calm Like a Tom, thank you so much. Jeez. Christine and Calm Like a Tom, thank you so much for the whopping 10 gifted subs from each of you. That's very, very kind of you. My goodness. Oh, this is a Colombo stream. I guess, yeah, I mentioned Colombo and then just the slubs come pouring in. It was an ill thought out bit, too. I had never tried to do a Colombo impression. The punchline didn't quite land as much as I was hoping, but the community responded. Responded in kind. That was my, just one more thing. Thank you again, Calm Like a Tom. That was very kind of you. I sort of missed the 10 gifts with the following Rob staggering. Wait, hold on, wait, before playing the alert. That's right. That's always fun for everyone. Everyone loves Glasses Rob, though. Shades Rob. Everyone loves Shades Rob, the wacky new side character of this program. Cool Rob. It was a spot-on Colombo. Thank you, Nixon Plumber. Thank you. It was a good Colombo? Okay, thank you. Okay. People are being very kind about this. Rob After Dark. That's right. Jeez. Very exciting. Very exciting times. Let's try and finish this program because I do have to leave in like 15 minutes to go pick my kid up from school. So let's try and get through the rest of this. But thank you so much again to Christine and to Calm Like a Tom. Very, very kind of both of you, and I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. And I love you both very much. Seth doesn't even know who Colombo is. Colombo's great, but Colombo is also propaganda. right? We're okay. We become okay with police departments around the country and around the world siphoning up all these billions of dollars because we think it's filled with fucking Columbos, but it's not. Columbo's just he's a fictional character. He's a created character played by the actor Peter Falk, not a detective, not a cop. But we're like, those cops, they're not all bad. What about that Columbo? He's great. Not a real person, though. He's not a real character. He's not a real person. Totally fictional. Law and Order SVU is not real. It's fictional. Those are fictional actors. But seriously, though, that's how it works. That's what we tell ourselves. Yeah, I see these cops beating the shit out of minorities or, killing people on the street. Obviously, there's a few bad apples, but what about all the Columbos? What about the Law and Order SVU and all the other various Law and Order franchises? And CSI? What about all the fine, hardworking folks and smart, funny individuals? All their banter that they're always doing? What about them? They need our support. These people are not real. They're not real. Finally, someone taking down Columbo. And I love Columbo. But I mean, this is how propaganda works, though. This is what we tell ourselves. They're not all testosterone-fueled, violent reactionaries. I always loved that Columbo. He's an actor, though. Actor Peter Falk. Columbo's very good.
Than Germany and France might be. And I would say Haiti is a really interesting example, right? So the Haitian state in the early 2000s actually tries to implement measures, right, that could establish substantial Haitian sovereignty. Right, this is the government of the Lavalas government. This is the government of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, right? And a component of the rising Haitian effort to establish real substantial Haitian sovereignty, of course, he was demanding Lavalas, not just Aristide. It was a popular demand for reparations from France, right? So this dynamic that I'm pointing to, that France has access.
Yeah, you think they're spending that budget on holograms to analyze evidence? They're sending on tanks and drones like they're going to war and you're a foreign population they're occupying. Yeah. How else are you going to pay for those computers? How else are you going to pay for those computers where you get a grainy image and you say, enhance that square there. And you see, oh, he's got actually something in his pocket. You can actually enhance the screen and you see in the reflection of the eyeglasses there, you see the bad guy. That doesn't exist. That technology doesn't exist either. All that special CSI stuff, that's all a pseudoscience. That's all. None of that is real. All the blood spatter analysis, the handwriting analysis, all of this shit is completely fake. You know that, right? None of that is real. We're of course they need those big budgets. How else are they going to fund the crime lab and all that stuff? That stuff is all fake. You can actually just get a computer to find details not present in the original photo. So many people went to community college to be crime scene investigators. None of this shit is real. Important to keep this in mind. Yeah, the body language experts. Yes. The cum labs. Of course, every crime scene is just overwhelming amounts of semen just splashed all over the place. You run that down to the semen lab and they get a match. They get a match on the semen right away. That's how that works, right? They need that. What do you think they need these billions of dollars for? They need the semen computers running at full capacity. Okay? I love too when the propaganda shows as well where it's like the public defenders are the baddies. These goddamn public defenders. There is no one more selfish There's no one more selfish and cynical and disgusting than these goddamn public defenders stepping in and preventing the good guys from doing their jobs. The semen computers. If there's one thing you learn in law school, it's that just about all that forensic science and profiling shit is, pardon my language, absolute bunkum. Pure applesauce. It is bunkum. That is a pretty outrageous way of looking at it, but it's true. It is bunkum. Yo, the profiling, it's all just completely fake. All just made up. Yo, that damn red tape.
Right, to capital,
pure
investable
bunkum
resources that Haiti doesn't. Well, the demand for reparations was an attempt.
Yeah,
to
the internal
change
affairs
that
cops.
calculus,
No one's worse.
Right? Aristide
No one's
speaking
worse
more
than
in the
those
language
goddamn
of
internal
economic
affairs officers.
nationalization, of control over or of challenging that unequal exchange by attempting to enhance
The goddamn commissioner's up my ass again just because I fucking violently assaulted the suspect in a crime who has not even been charged with a crime. Just because I violently assaulted him in trying to get a confession. The goddamn commissioner's up my ass because of these liberals on the city council. This is how sad things are in the city now. This is like the main theme of like all our favorite movies and TV shows from the 80s on, you know? I wouldn't know. Oh my God, Rex School Guy. Oh my goodness. I walked in on my parents watching an episode of Blue Bloods where a black guy threw himself out of a second floor window to frame them for brutality. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. That is really bad. That is really bad. Did I do a So I Married an Axe Murderer reference? I lost it already. That is fucking horrendous. That is really horrendous. That sounds like a crazy story, Lonnie. You got to post that in the Discord. Jesus. Okay, let's try and get through this. I got to go in about 5 minutes.
Or to, let's say, politically enhance the level, the wage level of Haitian workers in sweatshops where they're working for U.S. companies. And of course, we know what happens to the Haitian government. It's overthrown, right? One thing I wanted to add about what happens to the Haitian government is we got to keep in mind that Haiti and Venezuela are increasingly cooperating through this Petro-Caribe program, right?
You got to get the Haitian government out of there. The gangs.
Oil, right?
Well, while it's weird how while Haiti and Venezuela are starting to make these kind of partnerships, now all of a sudden we're hearing a lot about these damn Haitian gangs. Oh boy, these gangs are getting out of control again. We might have to move in there yet again soon to stop this. You would not fucking believe what millions of boomers watch every night on network TV. For sure. And if they're not watching that, they're watching like Tucker Carlson, which totally confirms all their paranoid delusions and conspiracy theories about what is going on every night. There's a reason all these conservatives think that like major like cities that are average cities are just like these dangerous death traps. You know, these people that are simultaneously like the come and take it conservatives. I mean, it's like, you know, these damn soy boy pussy liberals or whatever, but they're like, if you walk into like Columbus, Ohio, you will be murdered within 5 minutes. And they simultaneously believe these two things. Don't ever go into like Topeka, Kansas. It's just so dangerous. It's so unbelievably dangerous there. It's basically a war zone. 24, and I love 24, but it's the same thing. It's the same horrible propaganda. Listen, sometimes torturing people is rough, but you know, sometimes it needs to be done. Sometimes there's a countdown to a bomb, and you need to have capable people that you like and trust and admire, like Jack Bauer, being able to make these decisions. And if you need to snap a few fingers in order to get the information, then that's what they need to do. That's the point of 24. And I love 24. I genuinely do. It's so entertaining, but it's evil. Evil fascist propaganda.
So this is a way in which Haiti is, through regionalism, also establishing the means, again, for greater sovereignty vis-a-vis the United States.
Right? We're losing the thread on this video. What was the show where the sniper killed like 3 generations of men in Iraq? I saw that as well, yeah, but he felt really bad about it, though, Dakadoon. He felt really bad. They were just picking up he couldn't help it. They were just picking up the guns, and he was forced to do what he had to do, and he felt terrible about it. He had a single tear going down his cheek and everything. It's really sad. He was really, when you think about it, was the real victim in that situation. Cop shows operate on a whole different level than Tucker Carlson because everyone thinks they're apolitical. A boomer Democrat might never watch Tucker, but they watch 3 hours of Blue Bloods and Chicago PD every night, and just absorb the most fascist shit you can imagine. No, I get it, and that's a good point, Rex Cool Guy. Truly a cool guy, that Rex Cool Guy. I used to do like subtitling editing as a job, and in fact, I might go back to doing it on a part-time basis. But I watched a lot of those like procedurals and cop shows, and I came to the same realization: like, it's amazing what is on TV every single night. You know, and the subtle ways that people work on that this propaganda works on us, and then people say uncritically, completely unironically, we don't have propaganda. We don't have propaganda in America. We don't have propaganda in Canada. We're not like one of those evil, propagandized, brainwashed countries like China or North Korea. Can you imagine living in such a terrible place where you have to turn on state media every night and you're exposed to propaganda? Fortunately, I'm immune to propaganda as an American, as a Westerner, you know? But it would be really scary to live in one of these other countries where that kind of stuff happens. Very, very scary, very dangerous stuff. Being a commie kind of ruins a lot of media. Well, that is true to extent bigger way. Like I was saying before, and like I was saying the other day, and I say this often, that I think it's okay to enjoy these things. Once you realize how harmful it is, but you need to understand how and why it is harmful, and try to internalize these notions. And then I feel like you can enjoy this stuff. You can watch it, and a lot of it is very entertaining. You know, a lot of it is very entertaining. Yeah, I didn't fall for any propaganda. I voted for Hillary. That's right. I'm immune to propaganda. I watch the CBC, or the BBC. It also makes it funnier at times. Yeah, and it flips who the protagonist and who the antagonist is a lot of the time. They live is great to show the baby brain. I do not live under propaganda crowd. Yeah, that's true. Although they still don't get it. A lot of the same people that even hold up those examples still think they understand, and they don't. What was the show where American soldiers shoot 3 generations of a family? I think someone said earlier it was Generation Kill. I couldn't remember. I just remember seeing it on Twitter. I think a lot of people are basically smart marks where they know the propaganda exists, but they don't get all the nuances, and they think it doesn't work on them. They think they're immune, but they're not immune to propaganda. They're not. Folks, I gotta go. I gotta go pick up my kid from school. We didn't make it through the video, but we made it a decent way. We are 3 subs away. We are 3 subs away from hitting the sub goal. Who's the kind and generous chatter that could get us to the sub goal today? I'm positive that somewhere watching this stream, there is a kind and generous chatter that could get over the hump, that could make the number go up to the good number. I'm positive. I didn't fall for propaganda. I watch Rachel Maddow every night where she breaks it down. That's right. Or Jon Stewart. I'm an avid Daily Show watcher. This shit doesn't work on me. Both sides are just, the extremists on both sides are just totally out of control. Am I right?
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Moustache Imperial, thank you for the gifted sub. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you. You can Dunning-Kruger your way into becoming even more vulnerable to propaganda than someone who isn't even aware that propaganda exists. You gotta stay safe out there, folks. It can happen to the best of us.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Anonymous Gifter, our most Christ-like of all sub-gifters. Anonymous Gifter, thank you so much for the gifted sub. Thank you. We love our anonymous gifters. We love our anonymous gifters, folks. We're one away. We are one away. Can you believe how exciting this is? That is not true, Sean. That's fake news. I wonder if any of the Majority Report people are still here. I think a couple are. I think a couple are still here. Oh, fuck. I keep doing that. I keep doing it. What do you say, folks? You got another minute. You got another minute. We can still get there. We can still do this. And I know it's important to all of you that the number becomes the good number. It's so agonizingly, tantalizingly close. Are you going to be able to sleep at night? Are you going to be able to sleep at night knowing that it didn't go and turn into the good number? Chat's like, yeah, we will be fine, actually. That's not an issue. That's not a problem for me, actually. I probably won't consider it after this.
Count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Calm Like a Tom. It shouldn't be up to Calm Like a Tom, okay? Calm Like a Tom has been generous enough. But thank you, Calm Like a Tom. I really appreciate that. Very, very, very kind of you. I'll be back tomorrow. Am I still here or am I gone? No, I'm still here. I'll be back tomorrow noon. I'll talk to you then. Take care, folks. Goodbye. Dan is going offline. Too bad. He's taking a raid anyways.